Pajo Gobind Pool mat jah Manas janam ka ehi laah Pajo Gobind Pool mat jah मानस जानम का एही लाह गुर सेवा ते भगत कमाई तब ये मानस देही पाए इस देही को सिमरै देव सो देही भज हर की सेव सो देही भज हर की सेव भजो गोबिंद फूल मात जा मानस जानम का एही लाह.
So, welcome friends to another podcast in the Holy Truth series, given as always in the name of the Supreme Lord, who once again wishes to impart the very highest truth of what many call God, life and creation to the sincere seekers of the world, especially for the modern age. That's further supported by the Holy Masters, perfect saints and noble mystics of Sant today. Now this high truth of the ages is the noble path of Sant, path of the true saints, also known as the universal path, true spirituality or true religion, that is so graciously gifted to seeking humanity by the great holy masters, perfect saints and noble mystics in every age, who are themselves the true representative of the Supreme Lord even today. And although little known among the masses, once encountered, a sincere true seeker can easily recognize that this noble path or true way encompasses all true faiths and beliefs as the noble source of all, details of which can be found in our humble literature, spiritual centers or YouTube channel, as well as in the Holy Discourse series of ISTAuk.com, among other Sant sources from around the world. But before I begin today's session of spiritual questions and answers, I would first like to make a short introduction about who we are and what we represent here today, especially for those who don't already know, while for those who do, then please forgive my repetition. I hope to be brief. We are the International Spiritual Truth Association, or ISTA for short, and although now global, we originally set up in 2016 in the UK by request of the Holy Masters of the day, who derived their authority from Great Master Baba Savan Singh Ji of the holy lineage of Sant in India, the Levant and Persia. As such, we are a spiritual education centre commissioned to provide the very highest truth of Sant to those who wish to know. Thus, we simply build upon the work of the more traditional methods currently available elsewhere. In this way, our given mission is simple: to tell the full truth about true spirituality or true religion from the Supreme Lord's point of view, especially now in the modern age, while also correcting the confusions of the past and even that of the present about what is the real truth. But this high teaching is not new. It is the age-old path of true spirituality, known today as the Holy Truth of Sant, which in fact has been discreetly taught throughout the ages to the most sincere seekers of the time, alongside the more familiar religious or philosophical teachings that we all know of. Indeed, Holy Masters tell us that the simple teachings of mass religion and mass philosophy, or even mass science, are only there to elevate the masses to a position of higher truth-seeking, so that they can understand and ultimately practice true spirituality or true religion, with all the love, grace and wonder that such a gift entails. Now for those who do listen and take heed, Holy Masters tell us that they are indeed the most fortunate ones of humanity. As for myself, I am a humble servant and sincere devotee of the very highest truth of Sant for many years now, who has given his life in the service of the true Lord, as well as the Holy Masters of today. As such, I do not seek any recognition, praise or reward, as I only act with the authority and by request of the Supreme Lord itself, as well as that of the Holy Masters of today, to simply tell the full truth of God, life and creation to those who wish to know. I thus live in the Supreme Lord's will, and simply offer my humble demonstration, guidance and true knowledge to all who seek the same, especially in the modern age. Now, as a friend and co-traveller on this noble path to God realization, I only ask that you put aside my human form, and instead listen to and take heed of the loving truth that the Supreme Lord has to offer you via this humble form, who has himself been transformed by the Holy Masters of today. Thus I represent the proof that truly anyone can rise above their given karmic role to become truly noble once again by the true Lord's grace, if only they earnestly seek it, no matter how wretched or difficult their life may have been. For the true Lord of all is not only compassionate for the suffering humanity who seeks the truth, but also truly merciful. Therefore, everything I shall share with you today is a gift of wisdom from the true Lord itself, for the sincere seekers of high spiritual truth, which I have been asked to share with you. But please do not attempt to praise or glorify this humble servant in any way, for you too are all divine beings undergoing a human experience in this lifetime, though you may not yet be aware of this. Therefore, what is given to me freely by the true Lord, I give to you the same. In return, I only ask that you open your heart and mind to the holy truth that the Supreme Lord and the Holy Masters have to offer you. There is no need to give up your current faith or belief, only to listen, explore, and see for yourself the further truths that are hidden within you. For true spirituality is not a religion or a scripture. It is the birthright of every human being here on earth, no matter what their current background, belief or circumstance. Now for those who need further assistance, they may privately contact the main speaker directly via email or video by first subscribing to our valuable information service at ISTAuk.com and then requesting the direct contact details of our main speaker from our administrators. He will endeavour to answer all spiritual queries within 48 hours of receipt, but please be patient if he should take a little longer due to his busy schedule and sheer number of inquiries. Thank you. Now, before I begin today's session of questions and answers, I would like to say a few words about the meaning of today's talk on the true role of pain and pleasure in the karmic world of human beings. In other words, does this pain or pleasure have any significance at all, or is it purely random and seemingly non-purposeful? Building on from our previous talks about the true nature of God and its creation that we are all part of, allow me to summarize the key points here. Firstly, we are not who we really think we are today, for we are in fact multi-dimensional beings of the Supreme Lord, intimately connected with our origin, just like the ray of the sun is intimately connected with the sun as an expression of the sun, and therefore is the sun itself, in the form of an expression. Similarly, We are all born out of pure love or divine glory, as expressions of that divinity, that is first expressed as souls of divine origin, only separated so that divinity can love itself. Then, for the sake of undergoing an adventure in lower or illusory creation, we are enveloped by a temporary or illusory character form turned mind, known as the jiv in Eastern philosophy, which in turn is covered by a material body, which we all recognize today as the physical form, designed for the experiences of drama. Now, these three levels of existence carry great significance when it comes to our unfolding realization. Furthermore, creation itself solely exists for the grand adventures of the souls of divinity, and not for any other reason. Therefore, the entire creation is just that, created, and thus not permanent or real. Similarly, the universal or functional law that governs the lower part of creation, known as the karmic creation, from the physical to the causal realms, is just that, functional, and not biased in any way. Now, this absolute law is also termed karma, fate, or the universal law, etc., and is responsible for creating all the dramas we experience in life, from the good to the bad, from the pleasures to the pains, from the ups to the downs, etc., and much more besides. For without this functional law, the creation would just be a random soup of chaotic indeterminism, with no structure or order in any form. Therefore, it is this universal or functional law that creates structure and order in the universe, which is so finely tuned that even our complex lives of dramas and timelines unfolds in perfect order and detail so remarkably. Now, in most religions, or in various philosophies like Sant, etc., they talk about karma as the universal law of cause and effect that governs our lives, either entirely so or variously so according to their scripture. Yet they do not fully grasp this concept. They simply mention that good deeds lead to favourable outcomes and bad deeds to unfavourable ones, and that's it. Therefore, karma either punishes us or rewards us. This is very simplistic and doesn't account for the reason why human beings in particular experience a vast array of pains or pleasures in their life, and the unique significance of each of these. They assume an almost robotic form of rules, or an unfair expression of rules without any meaning. Now, this may work on a superficial level for most, but it doesn't satisfy the more earnest truth seeker. For instance, for the sincere truth seeker, a question naturally arises within them that asks, what is the greater meaning of all these experiences? And why should guilty pleasures or miserable pains exist at all in those forms? Well, this is a topic of today's talk regarding our human experience in this world that we call home for now. So let's continue. Again, summarizing the topics of previous talks, it must be remembered that everything we experience in this world, as a spiritual being undergoing a human experience, is meaningful, despite its apparent randomness or mystery. Furthermore, this physical or human form of existence is the most unique form in the entire creation. Why? Because only in this form of existence does actual ignorance of where we came from and what the future holds reign supreme. This means that at every moment of our lives we have to make choices about what to do next, or have to speculate endlessly about the meaning or significance of the experiences we are having, rather than knowing all this for sure. Thus, in ignorance, we can only follow blindly the chosen path for us, as a participant in the great play of creation, without really knowing the reason why. The consequence of this ignorance, and the resulting consequences of our thoughts and deeds, leads to the pains and pleasures we now experience in our lives. Yet in reality, there is no mystery at all. Instead, there is a grand theme behind our human experiences, one that is far greater than anyone can imagine right now. But before exploring that, let's cover some more background concepts. Now, for those who don't already know, the law of karma simply states that each choice-based activity, whether of mind or body, that is undergone by each and every one of us, carries a consequence. And that consequence is diametrically equal to the seen or unseen pain or pleasure of the original thought or activity. Nothing more and nothing less. Now this seems fair, intellectually speaking, but unfair from one's heart point of view, as to the reason why we have to manifest a particular train of thought or activity in the first place in ignorance, that then leads to the subsequent consequences of pain or pleasure. Indeed, do we really have any control of all this in our life, if our life is predetermined? Well, the answer is both yes and no. Yes, from the intellectual point of view, as in most cases, we have likely learned or heard about the consequence of partaking in a particular train of thought or activity in advance, so should know better. Yet no, from the helplessness point of view of our innate character played in this life. It therefore seems to depend upon what inherent characteristics, habits, preferences, etc. one has brought with them into this life, termed sanskars in Eastern philosophy, which we then label as good or bad. Both our talents and our failings seem inherent, that then leads to consequences, helplessly so. Indeed, looking at it all from a purely scientific or biological sense, then is a dog bad when it barks as part of its innate characteristics? Or is a snake bad when having venom that kills? Or is a bird showing off when it flies through the air, and so on? We understand that these are all natural or instinctively helpless occurrences. But when a human being, driven by its innate urges, helplessly acts or thinks in a certain way, then others impose harsh judgment or condemnation upon them, and then proceed in arrogance to administer punishment upon them, rather than supporting them via understanding and helpful rehabilitation. However, in true religion or spirituality aimed at human beings, there exists the concept of forgiveness, non-harm, non-judgment, non-condemnation, and love thy neighbour as thyself, etc. Meaning that this is the preferred option for dealing with human or animal transgressions. But it is often the case that the so-called followers of such religions do not observe these rules that they are supposed to believe in. They claim to be better, yet claim to be better than other transgressors of societal laws. This is termed hypocrisy in modern language, as mentioned by Jesus the Christ of the Christian Bible, for example. So does mere knowledge of right thought, speech, or conduct allow one to follow this right automatically? Or does society need to evolve as a whole to allow for better understanding first from the global perspective? Well, looking at it on a personal level, for those who wish to know and are ready to listen, due to their noble sanskars, then having identified the facts of the matter, what can we really do about all these weaknesses and transgressions that we all have as fallible human beings? Like the mood of the society we live in today, should we condemn ourselves, punish ourselves, or harm ourselves to fix the problem? Indeed, has this ever worked in any society, or does it simply alienate people further? Does it simply create bitterness and resentment within them that then innately justifies further, more deliberate transgressions that simply leads to further punishments, etc., resulting in ever greater bitterness, consequences, and so on, with no end in sight? Well, statistics tell us that it does create a cycle of transgression and punishment with no end in sight. So what has gone wrong with modern society? Indeed, we are still in a secretly barbaric society that we now call civilized. Even though the true religions and the holy masters tell us about and demonstrate how to live peacefully and harmoniously otherwise. With this in mind, many ask, how can such a tragedy of uncompromising judgment, harsh punity, or damned alienation occur in a modern world of high intellect, advanced technology, and greater awareness? Clearly, despite our greater progress in handling our environment better or in providing creature comforts, we have not advanced at all in the like thinking of our barbaric past. It is just more subtle now, driven underground or suppressed into ever-growing mental health disorders. Only very few in this modern world seem to seek to understand the meaning of it all and seek to align themselves with the noble demonstrations of the enlightened ones, both of the past and that of the present, whilst earnestly seeking the higher truth of it all. Indeed, it appears to take great courage for an individual in a modern society to stand up for what is right, rather than to follow the ignorant or barbaric masses. Now the question is, are you one of those rare few? This brings us to the subject of this talk today. Alongside avoiding the pitfalls of human suffering through the application of wisdom and understanding of the do no intentional harm principle, non-judgment, and pious living, is pursuing our other passions or enjoyments in life a real problem for spiritual seekers, or is indulging in harmless pleasures okay for them? Well, it depends upon one's level of understanding and one's needs as opposed to one's wants in life. For example, in a practical sense, if we commit a transgression against the common or societal law of today, which we are karmically part of, then there is a consequence. Hence, a wise individual would avoid such transgressions, else they will suffer the fate. In a deeper sense, though, and quite ironically, much of what society deems as okay, such as killing animals for sport or eating them for pleasure, not need, alcohol, drug consumption, gluttony, greed, arrogance, vulgar language, mindless partying or socializing that leads to misconduct, malicious gossiping, destructive social media, degenerative TV shows or movies, selfishness, and the sex industry, etc., is not compatible with true human happiness or spiritual progress, and so those thoughts or activities should be avoided by the right-minded. However, for truly spiritual practitioners, there are some pleasures in the world that are perfectly fine to follow till they no longer enjoy those activities because they have found greater pleasures within. But no one should force themselves to deny their need for certain harmless pleasures that do not conflict with the noble principles of their faith, nor should they force themselves to follow austerities of practice that they are not yet ready for. Instead, simply earnestly seeking to become a noble human being and seriously seeking the high truth of existence is sufficient at this stage, even if one cannot yet action these ideals yet, or perfectly so. Eventually, through persistent background effort, it will all become natural and innate. You see, everyone is at different stages in their spiritual progress, and so should not judge others or themselves too harshly. In other words, just go with the flow according to your level of understanding and awareness, while seeking to cultivate the higher nobility of the enlightened ones as one's primary directive in life. Then, in time, all else will follow, naturally so, or effortlessly. Furthermore, if we understand that everything in creation is of divine order or of God's will, hukam, divine decree, as mentioned in most religions, and that therefore one sees the myriad experiences, enjoyments, and challenges of life as a gift from the Lord, then why should one feel guilty about enjoying them? That's true, but there is a catch, the consequence. But then, why should consequences be there in the first place, if these are divine gifts? The answer is both simple and complex, so let me explain. On a simple level, Holy Masters tell us that only through personal suffering, coupled with right advice, can any human being rapidly make progress on the spiritual path. Advice alone is not enough for most, only for the truly sincere and ready ones who do not need to suffer to get it. That is the truth of the matter. The more advanced we are spiritually, the less suffering is needed to change our attitude from barbarism to saintliness. Now the more complex answer is this. For those who are not marked to be saved in this lifetime, then those weaknesses must be there if the karmic creation is to continue, and our protests are not going to make any difference to the Lord. For the Lord has a plan for you, a plan to raise you up beyond the limitations of your physical form, and to reunite you with your true self and with that of your divine origin, but in time. If this plan is to succeed, and if we are here to have an awakening experience, then those weaknesses and their consequences have to be there too, to turn us away from the world. If it were not for the many problems and insecurities we face in life, we would not question our very existence here, and thus we would be doomed to remain here in ignorance of our true glory forever. So that ends the introduction for today. Now let's continue the question and answer session.
Thank you. The theme today is, what is the true role of suffering and pleasure in the karmic world? The first set of questions I've got are around suffering. Then I'm going to move on to pleasure, and then pleasure and suffering.
Okay.
So first question. What is the purpose of suffering in our lives, and how can it contribute to our spiritual growth?
Well, as just mentioned at the end of this talk, no one can make progress by wisdom alone. No one. The nature of human beings is to learn through personal experience. Now, reading text or hearing advice is not personal experience. It just explains the experiences. Therefore, by simply hearing wisdom alone doesn't change anyone. If that was the case, all the great scriptures have been written by the great saints of the past would now have transformed us all into perfectly noble human beings, but it clearly hasn't. I see people reciting scriptures day in and day out, walking out of those hours of recitations with the same mindset they walked in. So clearly that doesn't work. But I have also seen people who've personally suffered at the hands of some exploit and therefore have changed their ways. So clearly suffering is the means by which the Lord uses to educate us or transform us. But then we need some advice to know what to do with that suffering, how to handle it. So therefore the preachers are there, or the scriptures are there, the teachings are there to let us know how we should better live our lives. So on one hand we suffer, on the other hand we're given a higher moral code to follow, let's say, which allows us to transform ourselves with understanding. Because otherwise suffering just is suffering then. If there's no rhyme or reason to it, if there's no explanation, then it is just pure suffering. And it doesn't help anyone.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
There are some examples of people continuously reciting and going within when they've let go.
You see, very rare, few, because they have already suffered. What you do not know is the background of those individuals. Those people who do recite and take in that information, they're not just simply reciting, they're taking it in, but they have already previously suffered. They understand the nature of life. So when they recite something, they absorb it, take it in, and therefore it can help them to go in. but there is the precursor that they have already suffered. They've already done the hard work. Okay? Yep.
Thank you. Can suffering be seen as a catalyst for change or transformation? And if so, then how?
As I just explained now, it is the only catalyst for change. Otherwise, why would suffering exist? We live in this world, born out of love, separated from divinity in order to express love. Why would there be nothing but love? In this creation, we came here for an adventure. And there's a layer. In order for the adventure to kind of be real for us, we have to be cut off from the truth of our existence and given a character to play in the adventure. And because this character now separates us from the beloved, from the truth, something has to pull us away from that character. So this form of creation that we agree to participate in, suffering is there. Suffering is the means by which, as long as we identify with the character, we are in difficulty. The moment we identify with the true self, all the difficulties are gone. And that's the essence of spirituality. So suffering is an important catalyst for transformation, because it allows us to question who we really are, what we're doing here, where are we going, where do we came from, and so on. It's a fundamental part of human spiritual progress. Without suffering, as I said earlier, no one will make any progress spiritually.
Thank you. I've got a question and a little bit of a statement that goes along with it next.
Okay.
How can one truly surrender during times of great pain and unexpected circumstances and fully trust the Master to take care of all these unpleasant circumstances? I seem to be more grateful when experiencing easy circumstances and get depressed and hopeless, and more fearful of the future when too much karma is being cleared at once.
Well, the first part of the question asked about, how can one truly surrender in times of great pain, let's say. The answer is you cannot truly surrender. Surrendering only comes when we have a positive spiritual experience of knowledge, where we directly know what we are surrendering to. We have to understand who or what we are surrendering to before we can even use the word surrender. However, if the questioner rephrased that and said, how can we truly understand or benefit from the great pain and unexpected circumstances of their life, then yes, as I've explained earlier, suffering makes us question the whole concept of life here on earth and our role in it. And if we are fortunate to come into the right wisdom, then the wisdom explains that suffering so we can utilize it for our own benefit. So suffering is a great teacher. In fact, it is the greatest teacher. There's nothing else like it. You can mount 1 million books, have 1 million videotapes playing at once, constantly trying to indoctrinate you with something. But one moment of suffering can put away all of that and transform you forever. So suffering is a blessing from the Lord, not a punishment. We see suffering as a punishment because from the scholarly point of view, in the past, they didn't understand the role of suffering. They knew that they just felt bad about it, so therefore it must be bad. And they ascribed pleasure as something good. But in fact, it's the other way around. All the pleasures of the world lead us astray, whereas all the suffering leads us on point. So a truly spiritual practitioner would ask only for dukkha or suffering, because that's the only means by which they can make progress spiritually, by forcibly turning them away from the world. Because the mind is naturally fond of pleasures, so you have to forcibly turn it away. Suffering is an excellent way of doing that. So if we understand the role of suffering in this creation as a spiritual practitioner, we don't see it as the evil deed, against us, but we see it as divine grace, and we make best use of it. And then that suffering ends, because once it's done, why do you need to suffer? It's there for a reason. Like you go to school to learn. You go before the professor and he teaches you. Once you pass the exam, you don't need to stand before the class again. You don't need to go before the professor again. You passed. So suffering itself has a big role to play in our world. of spiritual progress. But therefore we should be grateful when we learn the lesson. Not grateful for the suffering as such, because we don't understand it, but grateful when we learn the lesson of that suffering.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Based on what you just said. Because I know in life I see people and they just appear to be constantly suffering. It's like they don't ever learn the lesson.
Yeah.
So is it true to say that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when people who are very spiritual or are questioning and they experience suffering, they're the ones that make use of that suffering, and the people that are less or not?
That's right.
Right, okay.
That's correct.
Got it.
The reason why the others continuously suffer is because they haven't started questioning yet. So that suffering is there to prompt them, because they're at a stage in their life where they're not perhaps going to be saved in this lifetime by a perfect master, but they are on their way. Remember, there's a whole background to this. People who are initiated take for granted that they're initiated this lifetime. They don't realize that they've spent up to 10 lifetimes in a human form working towards it. They've gone through all the phases that you see others going through. So this is arrogance for us to say that we are special because we've been initiated. Yes, we have been selected in this time. Our time has come to go home. So we're initiated by a perfect living master, connected with the Lord to be taken home. But only because we've been through the merry-go-round in the first place, which we do not recall.
So therefore, for example, I'm initiated, yeah. So therefore, I could not help anybody who was not initiated, who was suffering, because it may not be their time in this lifetime.
It depends what you mean by help. You should always help. You should always be compassionate, loving and kind to everyone.
Okay,
it doesn't matter whether they're spiritual or not.
Okay, let me explain a bit further. So supposing they were questioning, but not deeply questioning, I can't sort of force them in any direction, because I know that
you can't force anybody. You can comfort them, and you can support them. You can comfort and support them at their level,
because they might not be ready.
That's right. This is not a path to preach.
Yeah.
This is not chosen by you. Each individual who's on this path is chosen by the Lord. You have no part to play in this. But if you encounter an individual at whatever level they may be, you comfort and support them according to their level. That's wisdom. You don't preach to them.
Oh no.
You don't try to convert them.
I can't preach.
Unless they initiate a discussion with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very important point. This is the point of religions. Religions have these missionaries that go around converting everybody because they think they're doing good. No. And that's the basis of religion, because religion is a club-like organization which people join and they compete with one another for who runs the better club and who's the dominant one. Spirituality is an individual association with the true Lord, and it has nothing to do with any mass group or club or even path. It is a personal connection with the Lord that's important here, and therefore it's on an individual basis.
Okay. I'm just digesting that.
Okay.
Right, next question. What causes one to be born in a particular family with riches, fame, royalty, etc., while others are born into a family with extreme poverty, with very harsh environment, with pain and suffering?
Now we could argue here which one is more favoured in the eyes of the Lord. But let's look at it from a human perspective, from a karmic perspective. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, karma is not biased. It doesn't favour one or the other. So if somebody's born to riches, wealth and beauty, for example, it's because they have earned the merit in past lives to earn that right. But what they do with that, that's the problem. Do they become arrogant and selfish as a result and strut about the world as if they own the place, disregarding everybody else? I would say then that is a very poor life. That is a life destined for hell and not a very nice place. So let them enjoy their 60 or 70 years of strutting about, because they will have to spend a far longer time in hell for all the transgressions they have caused as a result of abusing their privilege. Abusing your privilege of wealth, beauty and status and so on is a greater sin than the mere transgressions of suffering people who have no choice but, say, to steal to eat, let's say, or to survive. Now, similarly, if those in poverty and suffering do not seek the reason for this, they do not try to understand the meaning and purpose of life, then what has that suffering served them? It's been totally wasted upon them. And then it becomes just pure suffering for suffering's sake. So these people then become bitter, resentful, and perhaps incite a war or a riot. So both sides have their problems. But wisdom, if applied to either side, then they can make the best use of it. For the one who's suffering, for example, the suffering automatically lessens, or they don't feel it, even if they're in the same circumstance, because they've risen their attention beyond to higher thinking, and therefore they don't feel it. It's an interesting thing that you can have somebody undergoing the same misery experience next door to each other. One handles it positively with the can-do attitude, and they focus on the solution, not the problems. And the other ones focus on the misery of it all, on the problem, and the half-empty glass point of view, pessimistic. But both are living in the same territory. So it's interesting that how we can have a different attitude with the circumstances we're presented according to our abilities and characteristics.
I guess I was just thinking about, okay, being born into riches and fame and royalty, but be humble at the same time and follow a path.
Then they're most fortunate.
Exactly. That would be
Those ones who have that are the most fortunate ones. But this is not common. It's quite rare. Similarly, those who are in bitter, war-torn countries and they don't hate their enemy, they understand that there's a greater meaning to all these things. So they pray to the Lord for help, and they only concentrate on themselves. They don't judge or condemn the others, even their enemies. Then that is also rare. So both sides have their rare phenomena, but it does exist.
Sure, thank you. When one reincarnates back into the world, does he or she go back into the same country, same family, same gender, same race, and have a better life than before? And then the second part to this, what causes a human being to be reborn into a lower species and suffer?
Okay, there's two parts to that. The first part is it's not strictly so that a person will be born to the same group, the same family, the same country, and so on. Generally does happen that way. Simply because the karma you create, remember this is a world of karma. The only reason you can exist in this world is because you have karmic breaths to expend, either good or bad. So because the past is based upon the family you lived with, the friends and the associations, and the country you lived in, so generally speaking, it's more likely that you'll be born to the same sort of region, country, and so on, unless you start exploring beyond the borders and you start craving for, I don't know, another country or another life. And if that happens, you'll be born there because you go where your desires are. So first thing is that your desires determine the nature of your birth, and then the karma you've incurred in that life determine the quality of life that you have in that birth. So two things are there. But if you live in a tribal society in Central Africa, in Congo, you do not know that even America exists. Why would you ever be born there? Because you don't even know, your heart doesn't hearken for it. But let's say somehow miraculously you came across somebody from America and they told you the wonder of living in this kind of civilized land, and you started craving for it up to the point of your death. Then even so you're born in a Congo among the family relatives, you would now be born in America in order to fulfill that ambition and continue on with previous people who were born in the Congo and also left historically even 1,000 years before you, because you're all interrelated. So yes, you are all connected, and you are born with a certain group of people who you associate with. Like there are 8 billion people on this planet, but in your lifetime you may have a few thousand people who you actually personally have an association with, and therefore you will kind of incarnate with them as a group, because you each have an association with each other of lena dena, give and take. So you have to be born back again with the same group, although maybe in different capacities, in order to continue that karmic exchange. Even if those groups decide that yes, we're going to transfer to another country, so slowly you may be the beginner or the last one to go in that country from that grouping. So there is always an association and a desire that leads to birth in a particular environment. or a change of environment if you have that desire to go there, and others have already done so too. Because remember, you have to have a karmic exchange with people you're already associated with, either historically or currently. And the second part of the question is what causes human being to be born in a lower species. See, there are certain rules by which karma operates. And there are two types of human beings, or humans I should say, a human animal and a human being. So let's say you behave more like a human animal, with all the animal instincts, except you're intelligent. You're an intelligent animal, right? And that's the only thing that distinguishes you from all the other animals. But otherwise, all the barbaric traits, survival instincts, law of the jungle that you live by, is like that of the animals. Then naturally, where would you go after death? You would go back to the form that you idolized, that lifestyle, which is the animal form. So yes, human beings can devolve into the animal species, or even down to the level of the plants. It just depends on the particular lifestyle they led, and particularly the attitude they had during that life, which determines where they go next. So yes, you can go to a lower species, and it happens more often than you think, because most humans are human animals. They're not human beings. So human beings are noble. They're supposed to stand nobly above the activities of the animals. But if they behave much like the animals they despise in this lifetime, then their lot is to join the animals in the next life and pay off their dues in that way before being allowed back into the human form. Yes?
There are other examples of initiates.
Yes, it has happened. It's not common, but it does happen. So for example, let's say an initiate was initiated, but they broke most of the rules. They ate meat, they drank, they did everything. So when it comes to their death, the master will still greet them. Their master will still meet them, but he'll give them a choice. He says, you've not behaved very well in this particular janam, in this particular life. So according to law of karma, this has to be met out. The consequence has to be greeted. And he said, because your crimes would normally warrant hell, you're not going to go to hell. But instead, you will have to be born in an animal form in order to pay back these dues by living in the fear, insecurity, and difficulties that animals go through. They have their own level of complications. And you will then maybe have to eat meat until you feel sick. Let's say you're born as a cat. In fact, there was a very, very famous story in Haynes Park, the Dera here in the UK. There used to be a cat who used to roam the grounds there, and Babaji of Bias, the master there, said, look, please look after this cat. He said, feed it with the milk and let it just hunt for itself, the mice there. He says, because this cat was previously a satsangi lady who misbehaved so badly that she had to be born as a cat here. And everybody knew about this story in the beginning of the opening of Haynes Park, and everybody took care of the cat until it died. And he even described that she was a short lady, quite stubborn and set in her ways, wouldn't listen, and therefore, but still in the mercy of the masters, they say, even if you're born as an animal, you'll be born to a satsangi family, or you'll be born to a friendly or kind family that will still take care of you. So it's not all doom and gloom. You won't be born in out of Africa, savannah, jungle, running for your life. Not that far.
There was a story about Maharaj Singh stopping one of his vehicles to approach a forested area to speak to some tigers.
Yes.
And
actually, it wasn't tigers, it was deer.
Was it deer?
Yes.
I heard it was tigers.
No, it's deer.
Because the story goes that he approached the tigers to ask them if they've had enough of eating meat.
Yeah, that's a different variation associated with another master, not Jalan Singh Ji. The actual story in Africa, in Kenya, when he was travelling to a satsang. This is where sometimes, the principle is the same, but just for correctness sake, I just want to explain that during his time in Kenya, Jalan Singh, the previous master, used to go and visit Kenya a lot. And he was in a vehicle with the 4 Sevadars. One was driving and the other 2. And as we were driving along this dirt road, because he was going between townships, so in between that was just basically savannah and jungle, he spotted some deer ahead. And he asked the driver, please stop. He says, I have to deal with something here. And they thought, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody about. What on earth could you be wanting to deal with? So Master said to them, please stay in the car. Do not follow me. So he got out of the car and he went up to the deer, who did not run away. And he spoke to one of them, a female deer. And he did say, have you had enough now of this base existence? You know, he said, are you ready now to come back in the human form? And this communication is done telepathically, you have to understand, yeah? Because you can communicate, even humans can communicate with animals telepathically if they become aware enough to do so. So the deer said yes. The deer was so happy to see the master, recognizing that this was a master. And the heart fluttered and everything, so much so that the master then just hugged the deer around the neck and the deer died. And then the master went back into the car and resumed the driver. He said, we may continue now, without any explanation. And obviously the Sevadars in the car thinking, what's happened here? You go to cuddle a deer, or to hug the deer apparently, and then you left it dead. So nobody would dare ask the question, because of course he's the master. You don't question what the master is doing. But one Sevadar sitting in the back, a lady, plucked up the courage to ask. And she asked, no, Hazura said anything, oh, we're going to reach the township soon. Is there anything you wish to know before we go? So she thought this is her opportunity. So she said, yes, master, I have a question. She goes, good, very good sister, ask your question. She said, you know, a short while ago when you went to the deer and you told us not to get out. And she said, we are all bemused by this. We do not understand what was happening here. And master laughed and said, oh, I see. I was wondering when one of you would ask. He said, well, this was a former satsangi, and not, again, it happens to be a lady. Not that ladies are bad satsangis, but this is just coincidental that it was another lady. And he said, yeah, she was a glutton, and she would just eat and eat and eat and not do her spiritual practice because she was so bloated she couldn't sit. And because of that, she was lazy and slovenly, and, you know, in many ways was just a lazy female. And therefore she was born as a deer, where she was forced to continuously eat for a living. She could not even have a break for a minute, because that's how deers are. She said, however, because she loved the master too, she realized the error, but because she was so overcome with her need to constantly eat and enjoy life and to not do anything, that she had to pay the karmic price as a deer. So she was born as a herbivore deer. But when the time came, as we drove past, I did say to her in the past, in the previous life, as the previous master, that when I see you again, we will meet again and things will change. So that was the agreement made. So master honored his agreement from the previous life. Because remember, the master is the Shabbat. The physical vehicle of the master may be different, but the internal master, or the radiant of the Shabbat, is actually the same of all masters. So he came and he asked her that fateful question, have you had enough? And she said yes. He said, okay, come with me. So he hugged her and she died. So the master gave the explanation. Everybody was astonished by this. You know, there are several other miracles that happen in Africa when Hazur used to travel around, including his trip to South Africa, I could tell you about. There's so many stories I could tell you, even miracles. But that's for another day. But relevance to this, yes. The tiger story doesn't relate to this particular master. It relates to another 18th century master in India, when at that time tigers used to roam India quite freely, you know, before the British Raj killed them all. And that's another story. I won't go into that because it's not a master you're aware of. But yes, this story was told, and I think it's in the Tales of the Mystic East even, and it just demonstrates to say, yes, you can be born back to fulfill your desires that you had in this life, and when you're fed up, then you get rescued. So it's a similar kind of story with different circumstances, and this time that was set in India, and I think it's a story from the Tales of the Mystic East, and it's not related to Charan Singh Ji. Yes, continue.
Okay, next question. Is all suffering a result of one's incomplete universal perspective or understanding?
Yes. Having explained all that, it's absolutely so. Because if you did understand everything, you would naturally do all the right things, and therefore you wouldn't have to suffer.
Thank you. Does most suffering from humanity come from their close family, friends or co-workers, etc., rather than from difficult situations?
I would say most suffering that we experience today comes from our nearest and dearest. Absolutely so. Because they're the ones that we have karmic exchanges with in this life. Otherwise we wouldn't be born to them. For example, it is very common to marry your enemy in order to pay back karma, which is why masters always say that your spouse was your dearest enemy in this life, but now you have to make peace with them. And the best way to do that is to force you two together to compromise. And compromise means making peace.
So what happens when you split up then? What does that mean?
The time has finished.
Okay.
Everything is karma, to the exact heartbeat, to the exact second. And when that is done, it's finished.
So when you were with them, you're paying off. And then when you split up,
you're paying off and maybe creating new ones. So sometimes it is an ongoing saga over several lifetimes. Remember, in the time frame of the masters, millions of years is but a blink of an eye. For us, it seems like, my goodness, you had to spend 10 years with this woman. Finally, you got it right to respect and honor her, and therefore now it's done.
Okay.
So yeah, we go through many, many incarnations, not always as human. Sometimes if both of you lived a certain way of life, you might have to go back to the level of the plants, or the animals, or the insects, and share your karmic experience there, still as enemies. One is the spider, the other is the fly. You're still at it. Right? And it's that fun adventure from life to life, carrying over these feelings of wrong, you see, until you come into the human form. And then you have an opportunity now to work it out. So so the most likely enemy you'll have in your life, for sure, even if life seems okay, is your wife or your husband. That's why you should always treat them with respect, because you don't want to keep going through that experience again. That's why most people are unhappy in marriage, if they really are honest about it. Most dream of another far off life or a land, but they're stuck with their particular partner. They're not in love. They just apparently love them through familiarity. But they find more things to dislike about them than they like about them. But they won't openly say so. And they wish their life was different, perhaps a different partner. And some do action that. They'll go off and run around, and have several hundred partners, even to try to satisfy that need, But so the best way is to marry your enemy, make peace, and then it's done with. Then they become your closest and dearest friend in the next life. The most loyal and devoted friend.
But most people, I guess, when they get with someone, they're not looking at the next life, are they?
No.
Looking at right here, right now.
But that happens as a consequence. They don't know. They don't know what the future holds the next 5 minutes, let alone the next life.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, next question. What inequalities or thinking leads to more suffering in one's life, and what attitudes lead to the least amount of suffering?
Attitude is everything, because attitude breeds intention. If you intentionally seek to harm anyone, in whatever way, whether it's through gossiping, writings, direct action of attacking them, then this attitude, even if you haven't actually caused the harm, yet physically, leads to a consequence and leads to suffering. But it becomes mental agony. So, for example, nowadays we see a lot more mental health issues. And a lot of people can't understand why. Are they suffering mentally rather than physically? because in their past incarnation, they maybe physically didn't harm anybody, but they mentally abused them or tortured them. Because the society law says you can't beat up your neighbours without going to the jail or harm them or kill them. So now people do resort to gossiping, malicious gossiping, or undermining them or harming them in some way in social media. And then they're born now with mental anguish. So that's why there's a change now. As society becomes more so-called civilized, as I mentioned there, the physical suffering now is turned more into emotional suffering and mental health suffering, which is an interesting development in human evolution here that we see a lot more. In fact, the World Health Organization predicts a mental health pandemic for the 21st century, where more people will suffer with mental health and physical problems.
Wow. Okay, next question. How does forgiveness play a role in transforming our experiences of suffering into opportunities for growth?
Forgiveness is a quality of the noble human being. It's not something that is readily available to everybody. People operating in a lower frame of mind, in the lower mind, the emotional mind, react more closer to the animals. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Yeah? It takes a great person to forgive. It takes somebody of great nobility, human nobility. We call noble quality or NQ. That noble quality is not as common as it should be, but it increases with each yuga. So each of the yugas that pass, the spiritual elevation of the human mindset is increasing. So people in the future will be much more forgiving than they are today, and so on, until we reach the so-called golden age or Satyug, where there is no question of forgiveness because it's automatic. They don't even have to try. They understand that everything is karma. They also know the full story of what is to come. Therefore, they just go about their business. And in fact, forgiveness wouldn't even be in part of their language because it's so automatic. But yes, forgiveness, if you're able to forgive, then the Lord will forgive you. That's the promise. If you can forgive others their transgressions, the Lord will forgive you yours. This is the promise made in the Bible and in other holy books. Because forgiveness and repentance go hand in hand with improving your spiritual outlook in life and earn the right for you to come into the contact of a perfect living master or to go to a heavenly abode upon death. Most certainly.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to some questions about pleasure now. Interestingly enough, they're less about pleasure than they are about suffering.
Okay.
Right. What are the different categories of pleasure in the world?
Different categories of pleasure. The trouble is, the first question one should ask is, what does one consider to be a pleasure?
Maybe you can look at that one.
Because if we understand is there a universal form of pleasure? The answer is no. Happiness is the greatest pleasure, but what causes happiness? I mean, when Hitler annihilated 6 million Jews, he felt happy. Now, that may not be everybody's pleasure, but it was his. So we can't define pleasures in terms of humans' preferences. But we can give the idea that pleasure is some sort of reward, something that is pleasing to the individual. There are no categories of pleasures as such. There are only levels of pleasure, from the very slight to the very great. But all pleasures technically are not good for spiritual progress because they lead you most likely astray. The greatest pleasures are those that lie within. So we have to categorize pleasures that the ones that you have within yourself, where you have actual enjoyment of life because of that higher awareness within you, is the greatest of pleasures. And the least is the dependency you have on the world to give you happiness. The more dependent you are on the pleasures of the world for happiness, the more prisoner you are in this world. So pleasure, from the saint's point of view, is a prison camp in which you're always trying to escape or find some little comfort. But if you're able to investigate the true treasures and pleasures that lie within you, then there is nothing greater than these, and you need no one else and nothing else to give you that enjoyment. In fact, enjoyment can only come from within. You only enjoy the outside world once you have happiness within. Otherwise you can't enjoy even the pleasure. The pleasure is there, you undergo it for a while, and your mind tells you or convinces you, oh, this was fun, and then it's all forgotten. In fact, some people sit back and say, well, what was that all about? Waste of time, right? But you convince yourself that it's a pleasure because society says this is pleasurable activity, but it wasn't really pleasurable for you. So pleasures is a very relative term. And but real joy comes when you don't need any external thing to make you happy. You just walk, even in the rain, and look at the marvel of creation and just the wonder of everything, and at your own position of awareness, and you think, wow, how fortunate I am. And others will say, get out of the rain, you fool, you're getting wet. You don't even realize. So one will say, you're suffering. You're standing in the rain like a fool, and you're the most happy person on the street. So it's a very difficult thing to assess. It's a personal thing.
Of course. Thank you. How can moments of pleasure serve as lessons in the context of karma?
Pleasures always lead to pain. So I guess the consequence of pleasure is pain, because the pleasure must end. One thing about pleasures is we know it is finite. It is not eternal. Not like enjoyment that you find within, the bliss of within, which is eternal. Pleasure ends in pain, the pain of separation from that pleasure. So it always ends in suffering, yet still those who do not know carry on seeking pleasures, knowing fully that it's going to end, and most likely often ends badly. So if there's anything to learn from pleasures, it's that they always end badly. So are they worth pursuing in the first place? Or is there some better pleasure that can be had?
Okay. In what ways do suffering and pleasure illustrate the dual nature of existence in the karmic framework?
This is the exact description of karma. There's only two versions. Either you have a reward or you have a punishment. You can call pleasure a reward and suffering a punishment. So yes, it does describe the karmic framework.
In what ways does the pursuit of pleasure or self-indulgence feed the ego, and how does this relate to karma?
Well, anything that boosts the ego is bad for spiritual progress and creates karma, because it's an abuse of one's privilege as a human being. Any abuse of privilege of human birth leads to the ego boosting and also the consequent karma for their arrogance. So these pursuits of pleasures and self-indulgence that boost the ego, thinking, look how great I am, means that they become arrogant about it, and they often look down upon others, saying, look, I'm enjoying life, everything, you poor beggar, you're nothing to me. You're like the ants to the elephant, I could crush you. So the ego is there, and then there's a heavy price for that, which is why generally you find masters not indulging in pleasures. Historically they always kept away from mainstream pleasures, because this was a disaster waiting to happen.
Okay, thank you. We can derive pleasure from many things: being in nature, laughing with a friend, dancing, reading a book, feeling connected to others, etc. Are these pleasures necessarily hindrances on the spiritual path?
Let me now qualify a little bit about I've damned pleasure so far a lot. Only because most people abuse the privilege of pleasure and they don't understand the gratitude that they should have for that pleasure, and they don't understand the nature of that pleasure. So therefore they indulge so wholeheartedly in it that they drown in it. Like a bee drowning in the honey. It doesn't sit on the edge of the jar to sip it, it jumps on top and drowns. And that's what happens with people that pursue pleasure. However, there's another group of people that pursue pleasures, and those are the more enlightened ones, or the spiritual ones. Now for them, when they go to experience a certain level of pleasure which doesn't compromise their principles. So we're talking here about not compromising your spiritual principles, but having a pleasure that's perfectly harmless. And it's even beneficial if you then have gratitude. So pleasure as a gift from the Lord, where you thank the Lord for this pleasure. Even during lovemaking, you're thankful the Lord allowed you this privilege. Then every act of pleasure becomes a benefit to you, because you're remembering the Lord who's gifted to you that pleasure. Then that pleasure cannot harm you at all. You can indulge as much as you like, provided you keep the Lord in mind.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to some questions about pleasure and suffering together now.
Okay.
How do attachments to pleasure and an aversion to suffering affect our karmic journey?
Very much so, because if we're attached to the worldly phenomena of pain and pleasure, then we suffer the karmic consequence without any understanding of what is happening. We are in ignorance, and therefore we just experience suffering as pain and pleasure as a phantom, as a fantasy. But neither serves us in the obvious sense. It's just karmic payback. So in that sense, a person indulging in mindless pleasures, or mindless pain, mindless suffering, or the natural aversion to suffering and a natural liking for pain, is just describing what every animal does. Not just the human animals. So you're no better than them.
Can we transcend the duality of pleasure and suffering? And if so, how can we achieve this?
Yes, that's the whole idea of the spiritual path. If you find that pleasure within you, then you automatically give out the outside pleasure. The outside pleasures pale into insignificance in comparison to the inner pleasures. There's no doubt about that. That is why mostly people have gone within, whether they're yogis or spiritual practitioners or religious people, and have seen that pleasure within, even a glimpse of it, are magically transformed and shun all the pleasures of this world as just dull and boring. And they carry that joy within them, that they don't need the pleasures of the world to comfort them, because they're already comforted. They carry the comfort within them. As Jesus said, when his disciples complained bitterly when he was about to leave, he said, "Don't worry, I will send you the Comforter to comfort you, the Holy Spirit." So that was Jesus' promise. And the saints say that the Comforter is placed within you. And if you reach out to this Comforter as a spiritual practitioner, then you will be comforted. It's as simple as that. And once you're comforted in this way, whatever your circumstances may be, you never look to the comforts of the world anymore, because they all carry a consequence. Whereas the one you get from the Lord carries no consequence. It is just pure pleasure after pleasure after pleasure, and pure enjoyment, that you cannot comprehend, because there is no comeback, there is no consequence, as we find in this world.
Thank you. How do our intentions behind actions influence the karmic outcomes of pleasure and suffering?
Everything is based on intention. In fact, the doing is very less the part of the problem. The intention is everything, because our attitude reigns supreme. The actual experiences that we have in life, good or bad, carry less significance than the attitude of the experiencer, which carries with them from life to life. Because the experience will come and go, but the attitude carries on from life after life. So the attitude of the individual, their sanskars, their makeup, carries the most significance in anything that they do. If they have the right intention, the right attitude, even if they do something wrong, it can be forgiven. If they try to calculating do, let's say do seva, they think we're going to serve the master because we think there's some merit in it. But they're calculatingly thinking, I've done so many hours, I've done this way, or I should be praised and recognized. Then that seva is nullified and it becomes a karmic experience. They've just done karma, but they don't get the benefit of the spiritual aspect. So intention is everything behind the crime. So much so that we recognize this in the courts. If somebody accidentally runs over a man in the street, then we say this was manslaughter. But if he intentionally runs him over, we say it's murder, which carries a greater punishment. Even the law recognizes intention. In Latin they call it mens rea. The intention to commit a crime is what causes the crime to be committed, and not the actual crime itself. Which is interesting, that law recognizes that. And that actually comes from the Christian teachings. So intention is everything, and action is just a result.
Sure. How does the collective experiences of suffering and pleasure shape the karmic landscape of society?
Of society?
Yeah.
Well, certainly an individual, we've spoken about that. Of society, each country has karma associated with it. That's the thing that people don't realize, that the society you live in, the collective of people you're born into, have a karmic association with each other in that capacity. You might not personally know everybody in your country, but you are collectively suffering the good or bad deeds of the government of that country. And that is a karmic connection, a very loose but nevertheless realistic karmic connection that you have. So certainly, if the nation was to become noble, pure-hearted, then that country would prosper. That country would raise above and not have any wars or crimes or many other things, because everybody is of a pure heart. It is very rare to find such a country today. Perhaps the only one that was listed as the closest to that was a country called Bhutan, that resides in the mountain range in the Asia, and they're a very small country, mostly mountainous, nobody bothers there, but they're considered to be the happiest people on earth, and there's absolutely no crime, and they generally follow a very peaceful existence because they believe in karma. They're a Buddhist country, and they have a king and a queen, but even the king and queen they don't big themselves up above the commoners. They consider themselves to be governors of that country rather than some sort of rising above the others. So very much in Buddhist line, So yeah, you are intimately connected with the karma of that country as a citizen of that, and you have to suffer the collective karma of the country you're in, as well as your personal difficulties within that country.
So, okay, you got individual, you got country. So I guess you've got like
global as well.
Yeah, this is it.
The time period that you're born into.
And maybe the area that you live.
The area, the regions.
Yeah.
You have karma associations with the entire planet.
Wow.
Yeah, the entire planet itself is what sustains you, and therefore the karma of the entire planet is affecting you. If an asteroid was to strike this planet and obliterate it, so will you be obliterated.
Yeah.
Right? So you have karma expands even to the solar system. You have karma with the planets of the solar system, and then with the Milky Way, in which our sun is part of, and then the galactic grouping, what they call a galactic cluster of galaxies, and so on, and ultimately with the universe.
So if I go to an event and there's a group of people, there's karma collectively at that point in time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The particular grouping that you're with at that time means you have that momentary karma.
Yeah.
But it's not forever, it's just maybe for that period and you never see them again.
Sure.
But everything is based upon the karma of the collective. In fact, when you came into this world and you agreed the various roles that you're going to play in this play and adventure, you came with up to 1 trillion souls as your co-travelers.
Okay.
Yeah? Because you have to understand that you not only have karma physically here, you have karma in the astral realm, you have karma in the causal realm with the beings there as well. So it easily accounts for 1 trillion souls, but they are operating at different levels because you're a multi-dimensional being having a human experience here, but you're also having experiences in the inner realms as well, with beings there, based upon karma.
Wow, thank you. How can mindfulness help us navigate our experience of pleasure and suffering in a karmic context?
Well, if you're mindful about the role and nature and problems associated with pleasures or suffering, then you can make best use of it. So somebody who is elevated to the higher mind level, they will look at it all from a different point of view to the base level people. And therefore, yes, they can benefit. They can navigate through the experiences in a better way. They don't get too caught up with the pleasures, so they drown with it, nor do they become damned through the suffering. But they seek to understand the more meaningful meaning behind it, and therefore make the best use of it. So yes, mindfulness initially is very helpful.
I think you've answered some of these questions already in your talk, but I'm going to ask them anyway. There may be some things different you might want to add to it. What specifically causes someone to have joy and pleasure or pain and suffering, poverty or riches, good health or sickness in life?
Well, I could do a whole satsang on the various merits of good deeds and resulting karmas, but we don't have time for that here. But I can say that naturally, we've summarized this already, that if you are a force of good in the world, with noble intentions, good thoughts, selfless living, and so on, then you will carry the most benefit. In fact, you probably wouldn't come here then, you'd be in heaven. Because this world is made up of 50-50. There's something else that's quite unique about this physical existence. See, physical existence, this is not the way it actually is, but I'm just giving a role play here, an example, a thought experiment, right? You have heaven on one side, say above, and you have hell below. Now this is how the ancients thought about this concept, and you have earth in the middle. So whatever you do here is a testing ground. Now because you're right in the middle of heaven and hell, the natural thing is you're midway, which means 50-50. You have to have 50% of your life will be happy and 50% will be miserable. That is the reason why this physical earth exists. It's a go-between between hell and heaven, which is why, ironically, we can have both hellish experiences and heavenly experiences in the same place, in the same planet. Now this is so unique. Despite we thinking that everywhere else has good and bad, it doesn't. The higher realms mostly have what we call good experiences. Now good experiences doesn't necessarily mean beneficial. Remember, we're talking about pleasures here, right? Fulfilling those pleasures. So, for example, in the astral realm, mostly being made of the sense perceptions, it's all about pleasure fulfillment. So everything there is based on pleasure, but that doesn't allow them to have spiritual progress. So the beings undergoing there are simply enjoying their pleasureful existence, right, in a certain way. Yes, there is some suffering, but their suffering is completely different. Them is the absence of pleasure, moments where there's no pleasure, and that's their suffering. It's not a question of actual harm, right, which is interesting. So that's why they look upon us as barbaric, much as we look upon as spiders or some insects, They see us just like a flock of birds, bickering amongst each other, and they have no consequence, just like we dismiss a flock of birds. There's no consequence to us. So the astral beings see us in the same way, in that sense, the ordinary ones. And so similarly in hell, there is only suffering. Hell has no pleasure at all. The word pleasure doesn't even exist. It's not even a concept in their dictionary, right? And earth is bang in the middle. This physical life is bang in the middle of these. So therefore, to make a human being who can go either up or down, you have to create this karmic ignorance thing where they make a choice, and the sum total of all their choices that results in good or bad determines which way they go. Now that's the fundamental principle of religion. So religions don't really talk about regions beyond this karmic realm. They just talk about trying to get the best out of the deal here that you're here for. So good deeds reward you in heaven, which is finite, and bad deeds reward you in hell, which is finite. And the decision maker is what you do here on earth and in between. So human life itself is based upon a 50-50 mix. And if somebody was to actually somehow record every moment of their life as a video, and they'll find that roughly it does go 50-50. Now some people may feel that they're suffering more, and some people feel that they are pleasuring more, but they're not. The reason is this: because let's say you are in pain and suffering, in constant pain, but then you have pain relief, and you're now enjoying for a moment. You're still technically in suffering mode because you have an illness, but you're not actually suffering the illness. That counts towards the pleasure part. Similarly, let's say somebody's having endless joys and fun, but then they have an enemy who's constantly gossiping behind their back, ruining their party. Apparently, it looks like everything is hunky-dory. But if you watch something like Bollywood Wives or Hollywood Wives, and you'll see they're not hunky-dory. These people are going from party after party, richly, and they're bitching about each other constantly. Now you could say, what kind of life is that? Surely they should just enjoy themselves, but they're not. So it looks like some people are having the high life and some people are having the low, but they're not. Because when we talk about it on the personal level, relief from suffering is a pleasure. And the consequence of pleasure, the backbiting and competitions and everything that happens in the higher society, is a pain. So now when you take the individual aspects, it's roughly 50-50. But it's just dressed up to look like, because somebody's more comfortable in their misery and then others are less comfortable looking in their misery. But the actual accounts of misery, pain and pleasure is about 50-50.
But on the face of it, it doesn't look that way.
Yeah, it doesn't look like, but when you examine their day-to-day life, like if you look at the celebrities, just YouTube any celebrity, see how much problems they had. We hail them as celebrities, they had so much money, and look at their life, it was totally messed up. Most of them really badly so. You think, my goodness, I'll never have that life. But they portray, as human beings do, also the false face that everything is hunky-dory and fine when it isn't. So don't always think that celebrities are somehow better off than you.
Sure.
You know, because it's not the case. They're in the same position you are.
Yeah. Okay, next question. What causes some countries to be well developed with citizens having good standards of living, while other countries are poorly developed with very poor standards of living, constantly facing war and famine?
Again, this is the collective karma of the peoples of that country. So for example, let's say the country are very spiritually orientated, then the chance of them experiencing wars and famines is very less. It doesn't happen. Whereas a country who's a warmonger are more likely to be experiencing difficulties, whether mental or physically. So sometimes we can have a rich country that looks great, but they're not very noble, so they suffer mental health. So for example, in the West, we have relative stability. We don't have those tribal conflicts and wars and everything physically, but we have great mental distress. Most people living in the Western world are unhappy if they put their hand on their heart. They're actually saying, I'm not really happy. But they don't tell others because then you sound like a loser. Yeah? And it's all about the face of society. So they put on a certain brave face. Yeah, everything's fine. But it isn't. Whereas if you go to the Sant tribe of South Africa, they don't even have a word for sadness or depression or unhappiness. Yet they live in a desert, the Kalahari Desert, right? And they have to go out for their food every day, you know, and get their water and everything. Now we would say, oh my goodness, these people must be suffering, but they're not. They're the happiest people. And they don't even, and to prove that, they don't even have a word for sadness or depression or misery. And when Westerners from America went there to investigate how they lived their life, and they were shocked that these people never were sad. They said, what's the point? They didn't understand the concept. They said, talk it out. Sit down and let's deal with this. Let's get round it and make peace. They never really thought, they just laugh a lot. In fact, the Bushmen of the Kalahari are constantly laughing and joking. They're really happy, and they're not putting this up for the cameras.
And they seem more That's more civilized then, you would say.
I would say that's a much more civilized society. But they just don't have the creature comforts we have. They don't have the big houses, the cars, the monies, and so on. But they are happier than we are. And if it's all about happiness, and we have to look to a tribe, a backward tribe dating back 80,000 years, the oldest tribe on earth, for happiness, then we have to think, we've evolved into modern society, but we've lost our happiness.
Interesting. Okay, next question. When one dies and goes before the Lord of Judgment, does one go to heaven to enjoy the good deeds and then afterwards go to hell to suffer for the bad deeds, or something else? And there's a second part to this as well, so remember that bit. Do the good deeds and spiritual merits cancel out the bad deeds in the karmic court? Does any initiate of a perfect living master ever go to hell?
Okay, there's three parts of that question.
Yeah.
Okay, let me answer I'm looking at in reverse order.
Okay. Does any initiate?
Does any initiate of a perfect living master go to hell? It's very, very rare, but it does happen.
Under what circumstances?
These circumstances would be when they try to obstruct the teachings of the master, even try to kill the master.
Wow.
Once they know that, once they've been initiated, accepted, and they go, then they would have to spend a small spell in hell. But then the hell they go to, because hell has 18 levels of hell, so it's not just one place. But they will go to let's say a more purgatory, a more reformative or rehabilitation type of hell. It won't be the hell that we understand, in the sense of the way the dramatic books with the fire and the stoking the coals and the devil with a pitchfork and all of that. It's not quite like that. There's many different types of hell, but nevertheless it is a hellish region. The reason is because of the absence of pleasure. So the hell is the absence of a pleasure. So they are in constant turmoil, in constant difficulty. There's not even a second of pleasure, and that's what we call hell. Okay. Now the various ways in which that suffering is administered, depending on the level of crime you have committed. So yes, the answer is you can spend a spell of time in a hell region, which you've agreed with the master as the best and quickest way to accelerate the karmic clearance. But then you always get pulled out at a certain time. Now, do good deeds cancel out bad deeds? No. They work side by side. There's no cancelling effect. So, let's say you've looked after your health really well, you respected the body, right? And therefore you'll be born with a healthy body. But at the same time, you used wealth, greed, to get the blood out of the workers in your business, so that now you earned your wealth out of the blood of others. Then you will have financial problems at the same time as you have good health. Karma is interesting because when you look at an individual, they can be very beautiful, but be born in poverty and misery. Yeah. Yet beauty in the West is hailed as a thing. You become a model, you become an actress, yeah, and you succeed. Yet in a poor country, you don't get any of that. Just because they're born with beauty and they're admired by the local community, but it doesn't benefit them in any financial way or way that we have in the West. So yes, karma happens side by side. It's not that one cancels out the other. Let's say in the past you did some bad deeds, but then you lived a noble life, the entirety of your life, and one day you committed a crime. You still have to account for that one day of suffering. You have to account for that. And the consequences of that. It may last more than a day. Because in the karmic court system, the consequence of the suffering, the longevity that it resulted in, you have to account for that too. So let's say you broke somebody's nose and it took them 6 years for it to be fixed and healed before they got their confidence back. For that one action, you have to spend 6 years of difficulty yourself. Because the result of that transgression caused suffering for 6 years.
Even though the intention wasn't to...
Well, usually when somebody bops somebody in the nose, it's intentional. Yeah? I mean... It can happen accidentally.
Exactly.
That's a whole different thing. That's a different experience altogether, right? We're talking about commonality here.
Okay.
Right, where if you accidentally elbow somebody, like you move your elbow and you hit them and you broke their rib, then yes, there is a consequence because of your carelessness, because you're just looking at your own comfort at that moment, and you carelessly didn't look around.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a price to pay, but much less than if you purposely dug the elbow in their rib and broke their rib.
Yeah.
It's a completely different experience. So then it's lessened,
Right.
but it's still there.
Sure.
The karma's still there, but it's much, much less.
I was just relating back to the intention thing you were saying before.
Yeah, intention is everything.
Yeah.
Because intentional gives you the full force of that payback. Whereas unintentional things, which have certain degrees of unintentional, like recklessness, is unintentional, but it's still reckless. Let's say you were very careful. You're walking along the street with a torch in front of you to make sure you don't step on any insect at night. But you accidentally still step on one. Then the effect of that will be far less than if you were trying to avoid insects on the street as well. Your intention is not to step on any, but you didn't bother taking any measures about it. But you didn't want to. So then your level of suffering will be greater. So it's proportional to the intention behind what you're doing. Definitely so.
Okay.
And is there something else? One other part?
The first bit was, when one dies and goes before the Lord of Judgment, does one go to heaven to enjoy the good deeds and then afterwards go to hell to suffer the bad deeds?
No. You have a choice which way you go.
Okay.
You can either go to heaven first or the hell first. Most people prefer hell first. Yes.
What's your opinion on the Jain faith, where they basically avoid
Everything, root vegetables. Okay, yeah, you have to remember, Jain faith is quite an extreme faith. They've taken this karma to the nth degree, where they say you should not eat, say, root vegetables, because you're killing the plant. You should only cut the tops of the plant so it can regrow. So they have a very extreme idea of karma, and technically it's right. They're actually right. However, it's quite difficult to live that way of life if you're starving. And what they try to do is live the ideal, the perfect existence, which is practically impossible to do. So in theory, it's a wonderful idea, but it's not sustainable by the vast majority of human beings here on earth. Better to rise above the karmic realms and get forgiveness.
Is it part of Buddhism? Jainism?
No. It's they have their own history, more linked to Hinduism. It actually predates Hinduism because their particular prophets go back thousands, 26,000, 80,000 years, like that. And there's a history of the Malvira is their kind of main.
They wear like face masks to avoid like flies getting in their mouth.
Yeah, there are all kinds of methods to use extreme, because they're trying to live this perfect life. It's an extreme perfect life, and but it doesn't work. Let's say they did all of that, but then they curse their neighbour with malicious gossip. Let's say they forget. Then what is the point of avoiding the fly when they're harming a higher level species like a human being? So yes, in a perfect world, in a heavenly sense, absolutely right. But it's just not practical here to live that way of life, and it's not a complete story either, because really one should cause the minimum amount of harm here. It must do the very best whilst trying to maintain their survival to cause harm here. So intentionally you should not try to cause harm. But you can't live without causing harm in this world. It's impossible, even for the Jains. Because what about all the bacteria that they're killing every time they polish the surface with antibacterial wipe? You can't live without killing. So killing or causing harm in this world is fundamental to human life. No one, not even the masters, can avoid that. So therefore, what should our attitude be about all of this? Perhaps we should understand that if we cause the minimum amount of suffering in this world as possible, whilst figuring out the understanding and the meaning behind it all to get out of here, it was utilizing the human form to make sense of everything, then these transgressions can be forgiven. The Lord forgives you. And he says, okay, if you want to be forgiven for these unintentional harms, then do something for me. which is actually something for you. Meaning, meditate and raise your attention beyond the physical, contemplate upon higher things, then automatically these transgressions will be forgiven when you ask them. Simply because you've got the merit. When you ask for something, you have to have merit. Spirituality is just like having a bank account. Those prayers are answered only to those who've got the merit. Otherwise, if a bank robber says, please Lord, can you help me? And that's all that's required for the bank robber to ask the Lord, as the books say, then the Lord said, yeah, sure. But that wouldn't be very fair to help the bank robber as well as the person being robbed. Right? So there has to be a merit system. Okay? So there are ways of and the religions were all about building up the merit, but they didn't understand what to do with it after that. So if you look at most religions, they have what they call a moral code or a philosophy which they follow. And this is designed to build up good karma and good merit. But then what did you do with it? If you're not trying to escape the trap of Maya, then this doesn't serve you anything other than giving you a better life. So, the best way is to rise above rather than, any other means of trying to jiggle it around to your advantage, because you can't. So committing a small amount of sin can be forgiven if it's not intentional. Remember the do no intentional harm principle. That governs everything you do in the world. Nothing. Because even judgment comes under that. If you are judging, you're causing harm. Because you're pitching yourself better than another. If you're condemning, you're still doing the same thing. So there's only one rule, one commandment. Do no harm. Then, that's the anti thing, the anti-karmic. Then there's the positive, which is be kind. The 7 virtues, be kind, be forgiving, be patient, be tolerant, and so on. All these things are the positive aspects, which we come under do good, or live the saintly way of life, or the pious way of life. And if you follow these rules, then whatever transgressions you make against the karmic law can be easily forgiven. And even if you did something knowingly, but you've come to realization that this was not good, you find genuine remorse in your heart, then you repent, and that too shall be forgiven. So this fact of forgiveness is our saving. And that's why this forgiveness concept is so popular here. Jesus really emphasized this a great deal. He said, look, whatever you've done in the past is done. But if you now change and transform yourself and sin no more, meaning don't make those same mistakes then, and you sincerely are remorseful for what you've done, and you ask for forgiveness, you repent, then ye shall be forgiven. That is the law. But only the Master can forgive you. The Lord can forgive you. Karma doesn't. Yeah? So, living the right way of life definitely helps you, rather than focusing on individual sufferings that you might be causing if you accidentally step on an insect. But do no intentional harm is the mainstay of any spiritual practitioner. That covers everything from speech to thinking to action.
Intention
is everything. It's the driving force of action. Action cannot happen without intention. There has to be some driving force. So therefore, it's the motive. Now let's say you have an intention to kill somebody. You hate them so much, but you can't do it. You'll still be judged for that crime, as if you'd killed them. Because just circumstances, because of karma, didn't allow you to meet them, to kill them. But you wanted to. So every thought you have, every single thought that goes out there, goes out and is stored in the Akashic record and has to be paid back. Every little thought. People think, oh, the thoughts are private. Nobody knows my thinking, therefore I get away with it. You don't. You get away with nothing.
When you say a master forgives you,
yes,
for some karma which you're due to pay for, does that mean the master takes it on themselves?
That's what they say.
Because it has to be paid, doesn't it?
That's
Regardless.
right. The master does. You're absolutely right. The master takes it on themselves. And there are very many famous cases of that, where the master has been physically suffered or out of commission for a while because of such heavy karma. Yes, the master takes it on. The point of forgiveness, you're right. Karl is due his, give to Caesar what is due to Caesar, as Jesus says. Yeah, you have to pay your credit that's given to you, right? But the master takes that on for you,
So
for those cases.
So that's like a loophole, isn't it?
You could say it's a loophole, but remember, intention is everything. So if you're trying to be clever and say, okay, I'm going to sin as many times as I like because I just go to master and he'll forgive me, that doesn't work because your intention is wrong. If you have noble intentions and therefore you're genuinely remorseful, remember, you have to be remorseful, you have to repent genuinely, then it can be forgiven. It's not simply, sorry, I killed that man, please forgive me, Lord, and go off on your way. And just because you said the words, it doesn't work like that. You have to be genuinely remorseful and repent, okay? It's a condition, just in case you have any plans.
I have a few.
Well, don't speak them here. Okay, next question, everybody. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right, I've got the last question regarding pleasure and suffering before I go on to off-topic questions.
Okay.
So if anyone's got any questions that relate to pleasure and suffering, you might want to be thinking about them now. What practical steps can we take to cultivate a healthy relationship with suffering and pleasure daily?
Understand the significance, as we've explained. Understand. Don't take it as a punishment or as a free gift. Yeah? For pain and pleasure. Understand the significance that this world is made up of both pain and pleasure, and none are real. Only the experiencer is real. Therefore, at all times, whether you're experiencing pain or pleasure, you should maintain a noble attitude. Understand that your attitude is the most important, because that's what you're going to take with you when you go from this world after death. The actual individual pleasures or pains are just coming and going. In other words, you should be indifferent to them. That's the attitude you should have. You should be indifferent to pain and pleasure. They should just be karmic occurrences, but all the while you should be focused on the higher things beyond the physical. And if you can focus on the higher thing and be grateful to the master for everything that happens to you, that's helped educating you through suffering in some way, be grateful for that, or thanking the master for the temporary pleasure, but again relating it to spirituality, then that is the best way on a daily, have a relationship with pain and pleasure on a daily basis. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else got some questions regarding pleasure and suffering?
Okay, they all get it. Good.
Okay, I've got 3 questions that are just random really. What can one do for their loved one crossing over who have not yet been initiated? Second part to this, what do the masters mean by affecting 7 generations of family members if one gets initiated?
Okay, well, taking the first part, if somebody is passing away and they're not initiated, you must always deal with them at their level. You know, don't try to force anything. If they ask you, what is the secret of your happiness and joy? Then you can say, well, you know, I have this feeling, this belief system, I follow this and it works for me. They may ask you further, and you can even end up giving them a satsang on their deathbed, which is very good for them. But the main thing is, remember, support and comfort. Yeah, for non-initiates, it's all about support and comfort. You support them and give them comfort in the last days. That's the best you can do. And the second part was...
What does it mean by affecting 7 generations of family members if one gets initiated?
Okay.
What do the masters mean by that?
This is a general term. It's not exactly 7. Okay. Sometimes you'll hear 5. Sometimes you'll hear 7. Sometimes you hear 9. Firstly, let's clarify this point about the generations thing. when you came here as a group, you had different relationships in your trillion souls here. Okay? Some of those are very core to your life, and you incarnate time and time again together in different capacities, very closely related, whether as friends, whether as family, and so on. Now, when masters talk about, let's say, 7 generations, they're talking about this close association group, not all the trillion souls. Yeah, this close association group, because they know you and they serve you. So let's say you are initiated and you have a mother and father who are not. They look after you. Therefore, you're a walking blessing. Everybody who acknowledges you or helps you in even the smallest way is worthy of your blessing to them. Now, you bless them indirectly because you're initiated now. You become a walking blessing. Anybody who serves you, whether it's a shopkeeper or anything, gets a benefit from that. However, the level of association you have with them determines whether they are going to be initiated within 10 lifetimes or not. So this point of 7 generations, let's say 7 for now, right, are blessed. This relates to the fact what will happen to them. What do we mean? But they are blessed. What it means is that within 10 lifetimes from that meeting, from you being initiated, they will get initiated. Okay, it will not take more than 10. And depending on their service to you, their association with you, their closeness to you, their love for you, it becomes sooner than later. Okay, so it's not you have to wait 10. Yeah, it's up to 10. Now, regarding the number of associations with, it really just depends in your karmic grouping, how many people are associated with you. Some people are very isolated. They have hardly any associations. For them, it'll be just 2 or 3. For others, they can have up to about 9 or 10 because they have a large group. So they have so many generations forward and backwards. And this applies to those of the past and those of the future. So let's say 9 generations going back, 9 generations going forward. And the reason why it works both ways is because you incarnate with the same group of people. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the past or the future, because the same people are evolving in your life. So it's the same group that are blessed. So if one person in that group, let's say, gets blessed with initiation, then the entire group benefits. So it doesn't matter whether in the past or the present or the future. Yeah.
So this grouping, where is this grouping happening? Is this happening in Satgurus?
Yes, originally when you came to take part in the story, the entire script was laid out in Satgurus. So how long you're going to be in creation, what parts you're going to be playing, the individual parts of the play, who's going to play what. And remember, from the higher point of view, from the Lord's point of view, there's no difference in the part you're playing. For example, let's say you're playing the king or you're playing the beggar. From the Lord's point of view, they're equal. And when you came, you didn't distinguish it. One question I often hear is, oh, well, if I had made an agreement to be a part of this play, why did I choose the beggar woman? Why not be the queen? But at that state of higher existence, it was all an adventure. You didn't mind playing the beggar woman because you know that's not the reality. In fact, you wanted to play the poor beggar woman because that role was more interesting, of challenges and how you'd have to meet those challenges and overcome them to rise to the super heights. Because the benefit of of rising the heights as a beggar woman is better than if you're already a queen. You already lived a high life. But imagine as a beggar, you become the queen, right, in the spiritual world. Then you've made a great leap. Whereas the queen, sorry, who's already a bit of a queen here, what difference does she make to have the greater pleasure? So, in fact, you volunteer to have the lower form because you get more out of the deal. See, only here, when you're here, ignorant of all of this, you think, why was I born in this war-torn place, in this ridiculous place, when there are celebrities and kings wandering the earth? Surely, if I had a choice, I would have been them. No, you made that choice.
I thought that when you reach to the stage of Satgurus, you realize all the other characters were you.
That's right.
So what do you mean by this grouping?
Individual souls separated from yourself are interacting with each other. This is a love game. Now, in order for the play or the adventure to continue, you have to be separated into individual forms or look like that. So when you descend into the karmic realms, you each acquire a mind tool or a character to play the part, and you separate yourself. Ultimately, you're all one.
So it's still the same soul?
It's a super soul divided itself up into the many. The one becomes the many for the game of adventure. As I said in the speech, the entire creation the entire creation is created as an adventure playground for the souls. Actually for the Lord itself. To take part in. And in order for the Lord to take part in it, he divided himself up into many. Because imagine you go to make a movie on the screen and only one actor turns up. How much of a movie will that be? All the parts have been played. Even the one tending to the horses, the other extra that you see running around, they all played their part. All of it has to be there to play the movie. So you all agree on the roles you're going to play.
So when you say several generations, then they're just part of the same soul? They're not
ultimately, yes. But it looks separated here. And masters are speaking at this level. They're not speaking from Satgurus because you do not know this. There's no point speaking about something you do not know. They speak to something you can understand. And as far as you're concerned, you're separated from everybody in this room. But actually, everybody in this room is part of you. That's how karma works. Let's look at the principle of karma. Some people say this is very unfair and it's a negative thing. Karl is bad. He created this karmic world. Actually, if everything is you, then what you do to yourself via another form comes back onto you. It's a very fair system.
So that's where that saying comes from. When you hurt someone, you're just hurting yourself?
Yes. Yeah. It's like if your right hand disagrees with your left hand, so it strikes it with a stick and bruises it, and then you feel pain. Because of the ignorance that they look separate, but they're not, they're part of the same being. Right? So that's how karma works. It's not some random, made up difficulty, a devilish thing, as most human beings try to portray. It's actually a natural consequence of oneness. That if you cause harm to any other perversion of yourself, you're the one who's going to suffer. Yeah? Makes perfect sense. But it makes sense when you go to the higher level. We're talking about very high level now. Yeah? At this level, you just see it as a suffering and difficulty. And that one has caused me pain. Why is he attacking me? He's my enemy. Yeah? This is all game, role play. You're just here playing the roles. There's no reality to anything that's going on here. Only the experiencer is real, not the experiences. There's no reality to any of the experiences. The experiences don't go with you. Only you go in all states.
So there's no reality to initiation, is there?
It's part of the experience. It's part of the ceremony. There has to be some defining moment here. Yeah?
Well, ultimately, the initiation is not necessary, is it?
Ultimately. But then, how do you know then when you've been marked and you're going to go? For the mind. How does the mind? Yeah. Remember, the mind is ignorant. This is all for the mind. The soul doesn't need to be initiated.
It has to be part of the movie.
It's already part. The soul is the spectator of the show. So all the things that happen here, every single one of them are for the mind. Nothing, not only your spiritual practice, nothing is for the soul. But various books have written that you're doing this for the soul, you're doing that for the soul, because we like to separate the mind and the soul into separate identities and to distinguish good from bad, or higher noble practice from a lower practice. But actually everything you do is for the mind. Even your meditation, your spiritual practice, the initiation, the master comes here, all for the mind. The soul does not need this. It is already a pristine glorification, manifestation, expression of the Supreme Being, the Lord. There's no difference between the drop and the ocean. In fact, the ocean has become a drop, is the reality, rather than creating a separate drop. And in each and every one of us is the Lord itself, but playing the part of an individual. Yeah? And it's so well done because you're thinking of mind. The mind doesn't know all this. The mind is an added on tool. It has no intelligence of its own. So you really believe that you're sitting there as a male here asking questions. But none of this is real. It's all part of the role play. And the whole idea of spirituality is to see this role play for yourself. Go within, have a look, and see that you're the spectator of the show. That your reality is the spectator, but you are also the participant for the sake of an adventure and a drama. And this drama is a means of expressing your ultimate glory in infinite variety of ways. This is not the only drama you've ever had. There are countless numbers of universes, countless numbers of existences that you will go through in your entirety of existence. But because of this one you're conscious of, you think everything revolves around this petty life, and it doesn't, actually. You are so much more than this petty life. But you limit yourself, so when masters come here, they have to dumb it down for you so considerably that they become your friend here. Yeah? They're disguised as a friend. They have this all-knowing capacity of the truth, but they come here as a friend, and they help you. They work in some capacity here, you don't even know, because they're Barupya. They're the ultimate disguiser. Right? They hide themselves behind ordinariness. It's only when it gets out of hand that some masters are hailed and worshipped and followed, because their wise words and the few lucky events, coincidences that happen around their disciples is a miracle. And they speak with such knowledge and wisdom of things we do not fathom even. So he must be something holy. Then they get caught out. Even so they deny it. They all say, well, you're all the same. Even Jesus addressed his crowd, all ye gods, you're all sons and daughters of the God. But what did the Christians, religions, made up the scholars say? He's the Son of God, the only begotten Son of the Father. They simply turned the Hebrew terms and written it in Latin and then English to make it seem like Jesus was some exceptional being and that you are all just fodder. And it's not true. You are all sons and daughters of the God, pretending to be individuals having a human experience. So if you have this understanding, then you realize all these things are just ceremonial. There's no reality to anything that's going on here. But it's significant for the mind, because part of the game is you have to play the level of the mind. So teachings come in, satsangs come in, question and answers come in, initiations come in, holy masters appear. None of this is real. There's no reality to any of these things. But when you're at this level and your attention is here, wherever you place your attention, that is real. So on one hand, they're not contradictory. On one hand, we're saying none of this is real. But on the other hand, your actual experience at this level is real. So both exist at the same time. Because the way reality works is wherever you place your attention and you become aware of that, that becomes your reality for that time.
So on one part you're saying that there's a super soul and it's split into all these individual characters.
Yes.
Then why not just, and none of it's real, then why don't the masters just pluck you out?
That wouldn't be much of a game then, wouldn't be much of a sport.
Why is the game necessary then?
For example, when you kick a football around the field for 90 minutes, why do you bother with all that? Why do you have rules that govern what you can and cannot do? Why don't the guys just grab the ball, run with it as fast as they can, and put it in the goal?
But there are no rules if it's an illusion.
No, but there have to be for the game. If you're having an adventure and a game, you have to have some rules.
But if I'm the character that's chosen to come here to take part in this illusion,
you've agreed to take the rules as well. You've agreed to play the game with rules. Yeah, you're part of it. You can deny it all you like, but you're part of it. The fact is you're here.
So the master
that means you've actually agreed.
So the master has the power to pluck you out, doesn't he?
But why would he? That's like saying, okay, there's a game of football, like I said, and somebody just, the referee said, oh, to hell with this, yeah, I'm bored now, I want to go home and eat. Just pick up the ball and throw it in a goal. It's not going to happen, is it? Because in order for the game to be played fairly and beautifully, you have to follow the rules right to the very end. So yes, masters can. They can withdraw the entire creation back to Satgurus in an instant. But they won't. Even Babaji says that. He said, if this creation is to continue, then those rules have to be there. Otherwise, the master can just end the creation. Forget about saving you. He can end the entire creation. But it's not going to happen because you came here for an adventure and you have to see the adventure through. And that goes for everyone, not just you. Every single individual, so-called individual, is playing this part. But the magic is when they realize that they are the Lord itself, pretending to play these parts. Now, the mind cannot comprehend this. So having me explaining all this to you is not going to make any difference. But seeing it for yourself, witnessing it firsthand as an experience. Remember we said you only learn through experience, not through words? I can try to convince you forever and a day, and I never will. Guru Nanak couldn't, Jesus couldn't, Buddha couldn't. But if they have that experience for themselves, they'll say, now I know. It's no longer a belief. So in the beginning you can trust me and say, oh, he seemed like a nice man, we'll believe what he says. But I don't know it for sure. There's always doubt. But then when you see it for yourself, everything you say, I know. Then you come with me dancing in the street in ecstasy, saying, wow, nothing is real here. It's all an illusion. But until you know that for sure, you can only go by the sentiment of it, the concept. And then follow the path given by the one who's enlightened, who's seen this truth. Let's see if this is real. Check it out for yourself. So if you put as much energy into seeking the truth for yourself as you do asking the questions or pondering it, you would have been very successful by now. So redirect the attention. Anybody else? No? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, next question. They are random.
Right.
Why are there so many young people not happy with their born gender? And what is this transgender, non-binary movement all about? And how to deal with it if one of your own children is affected?
You see, as I said, that the world is changing, evolving. This planet and the peoples in it are gradually evolving. Everything is in this evolutionary state, including us. And now in these modern times, there's a lot more mental confusion around, where people now are confused by what they're seeing around them. They're torn between different feelings. So there's a lot more in the sense of gender issues. You know, what is the gender, is the way the schooling is, and many other things that people now are feeling. Plus they're also, like, males are eating a lot of animal hormones from cows, more than they used to before. They're highly injected with estrogen, so when these males are born, they have a high level of estrogen, so they want to be female. So it's much more rarer for a female wanting to become a man. You know, but it does happen, but it's rare. But these are hormonal drivers, and the lifestyle we have, the diet we have, is driving a lot of people, with a couple with a certain mental state, to have these certain preferences. And that's a consequence of the society we live in today. Eventually, this will all pass. So how do you support somebody? I think you have to respect that they have these feelings. They're genuine. And again, what do? Comfort and support. Okay? So the comfort and support of any individual in any difficulty is always the mainstay of our spiritual life, living with others. So I think that's do the best you can. Don't get involved in debates and arguments about things. Yeah? Just support and comfort. Whatever's meant to be is meant to be. Everything's in the karma of the individual. It's not in your hands. So you should just be supportive. And don't try to analyze it too much or question it or thinking you've failed as a parent or something. It's not like that. Yeah, there's wider issues here which I've just touched upon, that explains why the world is changing in certain ways at the moment. But it's not forever. In the future, it'll be very different. Even, in fact, by the end of this century, it'll be very different. They would have figured it all out, and there won't be any cross-gender activities or other activities. There won't be any hormonal issues, because the diets and everything will be so carefully regulated to maintain the health and well-being of society post 2055 that we won't have any of these issues now.
Thank you. Okay, my last question could not be any different, really. Which candidate for the upcoming United States presidency will be the best for their country? or are both equally ego-driven politicians? Is it true that the election results can be tampered with, or is that also made up?
Well, I guess I do say that I'm here to answer absolutely any question. So since it's been asked, I'm duty bound to answer this, but I'm also going to be very diplomatic here, right? The West is changing, and there's a shift. In order for that shift to benefit the peoples, certain difficulties must be there. Like we said, we only learn through suffering. So neither of the candidates are ideal. It's between the frying pan and the fire. Which one you prefer? Which way you want to burn? Both have their agendas, which are not for the benefit of the American people, actually. And yes, it is ego-driven. Only an egotist would want to become a president or a prime minister, not a humble one. No humble person sets themselves above others. So there's going to be great problems from next year in the Western world coming up, between natural disasters, political difficulties, unrest, economic downgrading of the Western economies. As we approach towards the end of the 2020s, we'll be in a very different state. We will be in turmoil and difficulties, but again, suffering is necessary to change a nation. How do you change a nation? How do you change the government's thinking? Without applying suffering, then there'll be no change. But then somebody has to be intelligent enough to understand. Now they're looking into climate change, and they're realizing that with this recent flooding in Spain, how horrendous it was, and so abrupt and so sudden, and characteristic of the area, and many others, floods and fires to come and so on. And that's because of the way we live our life here, but it's also the karma of the earth and the nations all coming to a head. But the people who live in a particular country determine the outcome of that country. If they're of noble thinking, then their leaders will be noble. If they're not, the leaders will not. So, and all kinds of corruptions take place. Yes, elections can be tampered with. Elections have always been tampered with, as this question asked. It naturally does happen. Yeah, but it's only when it gets out of hand that it becomes a problem. Otherwise, most countries just turn a blind eye to things like that. But yes, it does happen. So wait and see what the rest of this decade from 2025 onwards brings for us. It's going to be very interesting. Any other questions? No? Oh yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just one observation I wanted to make was I've known you for a long time.
Okay.
And apart from Master, the only one I know who doesn't have any hatred, anger, high judgment,
okay, yes,
revenge.
Yes.
So yeah, I just know it's just interesting. Does that mean we're quite lucky? Knowing someone.
Certainly listen to higher truths, such as this. Those people here and those people listening are very fortunate to have access to such higher truth. Now, what they do with that is their own affair. My job is to tell it as it is. And yes, I have Karmic associated with all of you here and with the wider audience who are listening. And I hope to be a good example to them. And I hope to demonstrate that no matter what life throws at you, or what even imperfections you may have, you can still rise above all these things by seeking the truth. And that truth be rewarded by the Lord's grace. So I'm hoping to demonstrate that as best as I can. And this is just my job. I'm just told and instructed to share what I know with others and to tell the full truth, however uncomfortable that may be for many. Yes?
You talked that next year is going to be particularly difficult.
Yes.
How can we all mentally and emotionally prepare ourselves for just so much upheaval coming next year universally?
The best way for initiates is to withdraw their attention and do your meditation and contemplate on the master as much as possible. So therefore it'll go over your head. Despite the fact that it's happening around you, it won't happen to you. If you're able to focus your attention on the higher things, the reward of that is you don't have to bear the full front of that suffering. Right in the middle of it, you won't get swept away. So keeping the attention on higher things and making sure you do the do no harm principle. No matter how bad it gets, do not resort to harm. No matter what. Right? Even if your enemies are trying to kill you, don't try to kill them back. Just escape if you can. Yeah? But wish them no harm, because they don't know what they're doing. If you can live by certain principles, then even when all harm is hovering around you, it won't touch you.
What about non-initiates?
For non-initiates, they have to use the best judgment they have. If they are noble people, just because they're not initiated, they could be initiated waiting. Yeah, they can still have good noble attitude. Many non-initiates listen to these podcasts to understand, and they can still follow the principles here. It doesn't make any difference to them, for them, in the sense that just because somebody's initiated or non-initiate, that somehow they're not going to benefit from being noble and good. Everybody benefits. The initiation only takes them home beyond this physical. But how they deal with this world, anybody, even a non-initiate, can follow the right principles of do no harm and kindness and forgiveness and non-judgment and everything, and they'll get the same benefits as everybody else. It's not that, somebody's initiated, therefore they're the lucky ones and all the others are damned. No, it doesn't work like that.
But initiates have like a layer of protection, don't they?
They can call upon that protection because they have a focus, but actually not so. The reality is, let's say you're not initiated, but you have such a reverence for the Lord, or the master of the day, even so you're not initiated, or the enlightened ones, then when you call upon that help, the enlightened one can help you, or the master can help you, regardless of you being initiated or not. Initiation only gives confirmation to the mind that your time is up. It gives a point at which the karmic account that you've had dealt with the negative power all this time, the karmic, is now handed over to the master. That's the significance of initiation. Now that the master's handling your karmas and pulling you home, you are assured, you are guaranteed to go home within 4 lifetimes or less, roughly. That's the guarantee, that's the difference. Whereas the non-initiate still benefits from the grace and benevolence of the Lord, but they are not guaranteed a place home within a certain time.
But initiates are protected from like major chaos in the world, aren't they?
Only if they call upon it. If they don't call upon the master, then, and yet another person who's not initiated calls upon the master for help, things might be different. It's the association you have with the benevolent giver that benefits you. If you're initiated just because your family members are and you go against it all, you just don't bother with it, then why would you be protected? Why would the master? It's based on merit, not the initiated or not. Otherwise that would be very unfair. That would give initiates a license to kill, maim, torture. Yeah? Because they'll say, oh well, we're going to be protected anyway, so let's do all the bad things, then we'll be okay. No, it doesn't work like that. The masters do not go against the law. They do not go against the law of karma. The law of karma stands universally for all, initiate or non-initiate. Make no mistake about that. The difference is that when one is initiated, they're given a guarantee of going home within a certain time, meaning, and they're given the opportunity to enjoy the wonders within, which are unknown to the others. So they can not only enjoy the wonder of this life and the wonders within, but they're guaranteed to go home with a time frame, whereas the others are not. But how do you know that tomorrow that non-initiate might be initiated?
Does the chaos, like they say next year, or the chaos on the planet affect masters' ability, like their plan, like in terms of
obviously they're scripted. They know what is to come.
Okay.
So yes.
On the point of doing no harm, even if somebody's trying to kill you. Was Guru Gobind Singh Ji wrong in promoting the principle of saint soldier? In other words, when everything else fails, you know there's a clear injustice and nothing is going to work other than standing up for your rights. And again, on that point, history tells us that no rights have ever been given to anybody unless they've fought for the rights, including women's right to vote.
Okay, can I break it down before you add too many complexities to this?
Same.
Let's talk about Guru Gobind Singh. He actually didn't initiate this warrior soldier. That was Guru Har Gobind, the sixth Guru. He started the Miri and the Piri, the two swords, the cross swords. It started with him. And there was a marked change in the direction of Sikhism with the sixth Guru, and who was influenced by the elders around him. Remember, he was only 11 years old when he took the Gaddi, the Guruship, right? So he was conditioned and moulded by the very resentful people, because after the father, Guru Gobind Singh, was tortured in such a brutal way by the emperor. The Sikhs at that time, in a human level, felt that they should seek revenge. But whilst Guru Arjan Dev was alive, he said no. He said, I'm going to demonstrate to you that even if they kill you, let it pass. There's no reality to this life. So he sat there and let himself get tortured. He had 3 times the opportunity to escape. He didn't, because he needed to prove a point. He was the Jesus of the Sikhs. Yeah? Jesus had also the opportunity to escape. He said, no, let them crucify me. Right? And then he said, forgive them, Father, for they know not. Now, when it came down to the second set of 5 gurus, things took a turn differently. The aspect there became more of a religion, and they followed more of a religious gathering and group. And they, as with any religious gathering or group, their idea is to defend themselves against others. So the ethos there, although it wasn't strictly so, because there's a lot of misquoting of what Guru Gobind Singh said, and we'll go into that another time. There's documentary evidence of that in the Victoria and Albert Museum, for example, of what he actually stood for. And the accounts of independent observers from the British and the Germans who were there witnessing a lot of his speech. Let's put that to one side for the moment. He definitely took up arms to defend himself. He never attacked. He defended himself with minimum force possible. So yes, he did do that. That's correct. But he represented a different aspect of Sikhism, not the purity of the Adi Granth that was commissioned by Guru Arjan Dev, the 5th Sikh Guru. Sikhism went down to a certain point, and because it was going down towards that point, the line ended. Otherwise, it should have just continued. Why limit to 10 gurus, let's say? But if you look at the entire teachings of the Guru Granth Sahib, it's all about peace, love, forgiveness, kindness, all the things like from the Bhagats there. Kabir's Bani is the largest entry there, by the way. Yeah, and then Guru Arjan Dev is the second largest entry. So of the Gurus, Guru Arjan Dev has the largest entry, and he's very clear about his teachings. And then Guru Kabir Sahib has the largest Bhagat entry, but the largest overall entry. So it's interesting when we look at the theme of the Guru Granth Sahib, what it's telling us, how to behave. And if that's our code, and that's been sent down now, we should be looking at that, because the rest of it is speculation. What he so-called did historically, who knows? Nobody was there. Nobody alive today was there. We only have some possible biased recordings from both sides. You know, you look at the Muslim side, you look at the Sikh side, the Hindu side. Who knows what actually took place? But there are some artifacts or historic documents of what actually represented. But one thing that does stand out, and most Sikhs agree on this, because this was actually witnessed at a very difficult time of Guru Gobind Singh's life, at the end of his life, when he was assassinated by the 2 assassins. Right, he was stabbed, but he didn't die straight away. He was in his tent being nursed by 2 Sevadars, you know, by Bahadur Banda Singh and Mani Singh and so on. So, those 2 Sevadars were listening to the crowd, and they were all complaining. They'd lost the battle, it hadn't been done too well, he was now being assassinated, you know, in a not heroic way. He's leaving this world. He didn't die in a battlefield, you know, a heroic death, you know, stabbed in the back by an assassin. It's not the best way to go, is it? But all of this was orchestrated. And when Guru Gobind Singh heard all these complaints, these two Sevadars said, you must go and speak to them, because they're doubting you. They're doubting what we're doing here. You know, what is this all about? What are we fighting for? So then Guru Gobind Singh famously came out of his tent, fully dressed up with his feather and everything, you know, the full part that I've pictured him in. And he did actually have an eagle's feather on his head. He went out, he drew his sword in front of the crowd, right, and did something really spectacular. And this is the reason, what I'm about to tell you now, is the reason why he's so highly respected originally in Sikhism. Today they do not know this. They respect him as a warrior. But actually what he did at that moment was what marked him as somebody on a great journey. He drew his sword point right up, then he knelt down on one knee, looked towards the sky, the sun, and then he famously put his sword down to touch the ground, so it touched the ground beside him, and he said, sweet is thy will, O Lord, ever sweet is thy will, let me forever live in thy will, your will alone is supreme. Basically quoting Guru Nanak's Bani, Hukam is everything, everything's Hukam, right? And then with that, he bowed to the audience and went in the tent. So, because they were their complaint was, your mother has been killed so brutally, you lost all your 4 sons, right? He had a really hard time as a guru. All of these things happened to you. In other words, there was a catalogue of disasters surrounding Guru Gobind Singh, right? And they said, why should we follow you? Well, you know, they were questioning. Well, you know, and that was his answer. And they were stunned, because they expected him to say, yes, we should fight and kill Karam and Amghan, fight and kill the Muslims, the Muslim hordes. But he didn't. He said those remarkable words, and that's what marks the difference between him and the crowd. So did he represent violence, or did he represent the truth? You can see what his words were, his parting words.
But he did represent, as you said, the use of minimal force to oppose what is.
You have to understand that the movement of the Sikhism, as I've said, and I'm treading here on difficult ground now in what I have to say, but went towards the religious ideal of defending the japa, the community, right? And as a result of that, then they took arms. This is not the ideal, but this was a theme of the time. From successive gurus, as the Satgurus became Sadgurus, the emphasis changed towards the religious format. The same thing is happening now with Radha Swami, that have become a religion. All great teachings end in religion, and religion has a different manifesto, a different method of protecting itself as an organization, rather than following the purely spiritual principles that Guru Nanak laid down. Because Guru Gobind Singh did not change the Guru Granth Sahib. He kept it as is and he closed it. Now, if he was this so-called warmonger that people like to portray, particularly Sikhs, then he would have added the victories things and fighting and killing, it's okay. He would have modified the content. He did not.
I appreciate the clarification on Sikh ethos that you just done. Taking that further to, and you were right to stop me when I was questioning you. So I'd like now to take forward to the present, where some people talk about one man's terrorist being another man's freedom fighter, where there are problems where freedom fighters truly believe that they're on the right path, and it's their duty to defend themselves to the point of sacrificing their own lives. And if you were to, let's take for example certain Muslims being classified as terrorists, not all, but some of them are very pious people, genuinely believe that they are being trodden upon, and the Christians are against them, the West is against them, and it's been going on for so long because they haven't defended themselves, and they've decided to fight and die And to end this, the reason why I asked this question is that this is not a new question. Even in Christianity, the principle of thou shalt not kill was taken by certain Christians that you will never fight.
Correct.
The Lord will fight for you.
The Holy Book is the real guide, not the hearsay afterwards.
Okay, but that hasn't worked. Okay, that we will not fight, the Lord will help us. That's the impression I'm getting. That has not worked.
We've already explained
Yeah.
the karma that each nation has, the collective people. You see, when you read scriptures, when you write scripture, you're writing ideals. Ideals are something to look to. It doesn't mean you can follow them. Most Christians don't follow the ideals of their holy book. Most Sikhs don't follow the ideals of the Guru Granth Sahib. Most Hindus don't follow the ideals of their Puranas and the Shastras and so on, the Vedas, because they're born with different mindsets. So in all this idealism, we're not in an ideal world. Therefore, there are going to be people who either will dismiss the scripture and do as they please, the law of the jungle, which prevails a little bit, or they'll use the scriptures to say that they're the chosen ones and therefore they must convert everybody, despite the fact that none of the scriptures say you should forcibly convert anybody to anything, which is interesting. These are by political leaders, because in olden times, most people couldn't read or write. They relied on the scholars and the educated ones to lead the masses. Now this type of idea carried on from generation after generation. It became so entrenched in the religions of the world today that each religion now has this belief that they're chosen, or they're special, or they're different. And religion now is used to create separations in man rather than to unify them under the one faith of the Lord. And this is a problem now. They've misrepresented the religions, so now they believe that there is a grievance to be had and so on. But this is the karma of the countries. These people should really ideally get together and talk it out. Why bother worrying about it? Why not sit down and talk it through? If everybody threw love at this and understanding and peaceful intentions, we would have had peace a long time ago. But there's a core of people who do not want peace. They want to dominate. And because of these, they bring everybody else into the fold. The vast majority of Palestinians, for example, they're not interested in this war. They don't want to go through this war. But the leaders have selfish intentions, and they're hiding into Qatar. They're living it up, billionaires living it up there, full of wealth. All the aid that was given to the Palestinian people over the last decades had been given to them. They've taken it. And they're the ones who either armed the Hamas group, or they're living it up in billionaire palaces, in Qatar. That's the actual sad fact of it. The people are not getting any of this. And the poor people are suffering. You see? So things are not always what they seem. Similarly, the Israelis, because of their history of being constantly persecuted, feel now that they should get recompense. They should go out there and destroy everybody else who's against them. Again, it's a wrong philosophy. Most Israelis want peace in the region. They don't want to be fighting. They want to sit down and talk. And they're similarly bemused. Why can't we just sit down and talk it out? Why do we need to kill each other? So you see, the right-minded individuals have the same mindset on both sides. Let's just talk. Let's sort this out. Let's create a two-nation policy country. But the warmongers, or the select people who happen to be in power, the law of the jungle, the survivor of the fittest, the strongest, always lead, they're the ones who instigate these wars because they have a particular interest.
You mentioned that there will always be people wanting to dominate. I think that's one of the root causes of our suffering in the
whether
world.
it's governments of the day or warmongers.
Or whether it's a religion, whether people saying Islam will prevail. Or you can only go to...
But Islam means peace. If they just use the word Islam to indicate that, why would they fight anybody? But you see, the Wahhabis of Saudi Arabia were the earliest sort of really strict Sharia law followers there. And then you have the Shiites, in Iran and certain Persian countries as well, who have this self-punishment kind of thing. See, even in Islam, there's groups which don't agree with each other about the interpretation of the Quran. In Christianity, we have so many denominations, right? In Sikhism, less so, but they're still there. So, when you look at religion as a whole, it's a real mess. But there is a core message that nobody's looking at, because the people who have a vested interest in creating conflict, they make sure that they don't send this message. We're here to help correct this misunderstanding, and that these religions actually teach peace and goodness and connect with the Lord, and that's what it's all about, not fighting each other, not killing each other. I don't know any of the holy books where that's written. None of them. So where are we getting this habit from? And how can they obviously boldly stand there waving the flag of whatever religion they have and claim to be a religious follower when they're making a mockery of the teachings?
Because it's easy to get up the ladder when you wish to be better than others. It's the ladder of religion is very quick to rise, and so
that's why they say the religions are of the negative power.
Yeah.
That the spirituality comes here, then religion hijacks it and uses it for its own political gain. So religion is classed as the politicization of spirituality, right? And therefore it becomes now a political tool. Whereas the saints who came here originally taught peace, love, higher thinking and so on. They all taught the same. Yet when it's written down and produced in the scripture, the people who follow them say, right, okay, we're born to this country, we're special, this is our saint, it doesn't belong to anybody else, right? Therefore we're going to create a community in which we are segregated from others and we're special. And not only that, we're going to dress differently. We're going to make sure people don't know, just in case. You know, we're going to dress so we look the part. Yeah, we're better than others. And it's this is what they say that they say the negative power, or Karl, the negative hijacks the goodness of religion and philosophy and converts it into a religion, which is a club-like membership. And just like any football club where they fight each other, right? So these religions fight each other. There's no difference. I don't see any difference between the religions and the football clubs. They're both as bad as each other. You know? But within them, there's a core people who keep quiet, out of the way, and they practice spirituality at home, within themselves, and they get saved. None of these warmongers get saved. None of them.
The Sufis in Islam?
Yeah, Sufis originally, the Sufis from Persia, they were in par with the Sikhs. And that's why there's a couple of Sufi saints included in the Guru Granth Sahib, like Baba Farid and so on. And because Guru Arjan Dev tried to show the universality of teaching across the religions. So yes, Sufis also represent Sant Mat, but now they've become a religion too. So they've lost a lot of their very special elements, you know, and they don't follow, say, the teaching of Bulleh Shah, the most famous Sufi. And so it's become religion, and it happens with all spirit. That's why even Rajaswami now, look, headed by the recent masters, now it's becoming a religion, as predicted by Great Master as well. But yet, and then also the spirituality is moving now to the West. See, but for the West to become spiritual, they have to suffer. They have to have a downturn in the economy, political unrest, for people to say enough is enough. And they want comfort and support, which is the additional role of religion, let's say, and they want to go towards spirituality. And with a better education, better access to information, they will be able to rise above the commonality of man and seek to become the new India for the next 3,000 or 4,000 years. You know, India will become very commercial, become westernized, it'll become a powerhouse of industry and construction, same as China. So they'll be the main manufacturing, and all the services and the intelligentsia will be in the West. You see? So the roles are going to shift quite a bit. Whereas before the Westerners looked to the East for wisdom, in years to come it'll be the totally other way around. So everything's changing. Yeah, nothing stays. So whatever position you're in, just focus within and get the hell out of here. Yeah, that's what I'd say, because there's no paradise anywhere. Yeah, but even whilst you're living this world, if you embrace the nobility of the saints, then surely goodness and mercy will follow you all the days of your life. And that's the essential principle of this do good, you know, and do no harm. And yes, there's many conflicts in the world, but you just look at it in bemusement, especially when you realise that they're all based on some sort of holy book which teaches the opposite. And you think, how the hell did they interpret the book in this way? Even the jihad concept in Islam is a personal struggle. It doesn't mean war. It means struggle with the mind that Prophet Muhammad had. You know, and he spoke about jihad. They've hijacked that personal struggle to say now it's a struggle against others. So people are very clever to hijack things from religion and twist it. See, now the Bible, they don't like the idea because of the Crusades and everything, thou shalt not kill, is in the Bible. So now they've translated modernly to thou shalt not murder. Right? And what a corruption of the original teachings. And it's so odd. The teachings have been forever translated and retranslated to a point that it's okay, you know, that eventually everything will be up for grabs. Who knows where they will end up. But in another 2,000 years' time, the world will not be here as we know it today. So don't worry. But we're not going to be around, most of us, to see that terrible time. Yeah, humans will annihilate themselves in a line with others, you know, beyond this physical, I mean not beyond this solar system. Then we have other visitors and intelligent beings going to be visiting us, and that's going to align themselves with certain peoples here which don't have our best intentions, and that's going to cause a lot of problems and the ultimate destruction of the earth. So enjoy now while you can the benefits of this simple life that we're having now, because things are only going to get more complicated as the century ends, particularly after 2070, and I think most people here will not be alive in 2070, so we don't have to worry about what happens then. But it's all interesting stuff. All of this you can see for yourself when you go in and explore around in the astral realm. The entire script of this planet is listed there. You can see all what's happening. So then you say, so grateful, thank you. I'm born at this time to escape. Can you imagine born then? What life is going to be like then? You know? Yeah.
You know, when you're initiated by them, are you generally going through more heavy karma, or
Yes.
Karma at a faster
Karma's
pace?
accelerated for
Right.
satsangs. That's why most people
Something
say
to
that.
prepare for.
Yeah, that's why it's not for the faint-hearted, like Guru Nanak said. This is definitely for the brave.
Yeah.
Because once you're initiated, you have an accelerated karma, you have much more difficulty than otherwise. Because remember, the promise is to take within a certain time frame.
Right.
So you have to clear the account.
Yeah.
So definitely 2 times.
It's good to know that. Yeah.
There's 2 times that satsang is witnessed the most suffering. Immediately after initiation, all hell breaks loose, but there's a positive vibe in the air because they're still riding high from being initiated, so they can cope with it better. And then at the end of their life, massive amounts of difficulty comes before they pass to clear up anything that they haven't done.
Right.
So, yeah, those are the 2 times. In between that, yeah, it's a steady difficulties,
Yeah.
you know. But you know when your time's up, because suddenly all hell breaks loose around you, and then you think, okay, I've not got long now for this world. But it doesn't matter, because you're going to be half out of it anyway. You don't really care. But if you've made good spiritual progress, you definitely won't care. You won't feel anything. When a part calls for you to have pain and suffering, you don't feel it at all. So the advantage of initiates are that they have this ability to rise above the pain and suffering of life. So although they're going through it, because your attention is away. So imagine if I numbed the leg, and then there's somebody cutting at the leg. Well, I wouldn't feel anything.
Yeah.
It's anaesthetised. Same thing happened. But everybody sees what horrific things happening to your leg. Everybody in the world said, wow, poor you. You say, I don't feel anything. That's exactly what happened. Even if you're going to have a tragic death. Being initiated means that the master withdraws your soul moments before impact. So you don't actually feel the impact that would cause you death and suffering. So withdraw the attention. So there's a lot of benefits of being initiated. Right? Yes, the suffering is there, but it's actually good. Because now the account is handed in the hands of the master, who steers you in a particular way. A, to clear the account, to keep you in this world. And secondly, to clear up certain habits you might have, or direct your attention in another way, so that you start thinking of higher noble things. A lot of things go on behind the scenes when you're initiated that you don't know about. You know? And actually you have nothing to do with any of it. Everything is done by the Lord. Everything is done by the Master, who's pulling from Parbrahm, from the region of pure soul. He's pulling you at a certain rate that you can cope with, according to the mind. You have no say in the matter. But when you sit in meditation, when you do good and noble things, you put your hand and say, look at me, I'm a good one. But it's nothing to do with you. If this path, the success on this path had anything to do with you, no one would be home. It's just not possible for the mind to give itself up like a drunken fool and surrender to the master. The mind wants to live. It wants to enjoy. It's driven by reward. Right? That's the emphasis. The soul is pure and indifferent to the whole show. So whatever the mind does is purely based upon its own end, its own gain. But we utilize the mind initially to help us on this journey. But eventually you rise above that, and you realize at the level of the soul who you really are. Then you look at the marveling, wow, the whole deception is laid before you. And it becomes an amazing wonder. You're not upset. You're relieved. It's like waking up from a bad dream. You know, and you suddenly think, thank God that was only a dream. It's relief. Yeah? Yes.
Sorry, just lost the words. But the concept was, the idea was that I can certainly believe that if the world made contact with a new set of aliens, the first thought that would come to mind to the authorities would be, how can we use their technology
That's exactly what's happening now.
to maintain our dominance.
You know, aliens have been here for the last 2,000 or 3,000 years, living underground because they can't cope with the atmosphere and the radiation of the sun, of the yellow sun. So they live with special suits that they wear, and they live underground right now, and they're already working with the establishment in technology exchange ideas for privilege to live here unharmed. Already that exists. There are many, many places around the world which humans are collaborating with these aliens. They've already been here for thousands of years, but they can't inhabit this planet because they can't survive above ground. They have to create a special they can momentarily, because they have this special suit that they wear, but they can't, mostly at night, they can't come out during the daytime when the sun is there. So for that reason they live in underground caverns and everything, but they coexist with us. In fact, there are several races of so-called aliens, but the ones I'm talking about will come from the nearby galaxy, Andromeda and so on, and they will befriend us, will be part of a federation. Therefore, the Star Trek concept of a federation of planets will actually become a reality.
Yeah. Why can't we be associated, and why can't we be visited by aliens who are not forced to sell their technology or to be misused by us humans?
I would say it's the other way around.
Yeah.
These aliens are not benevolent to us. At the moment, they're working with humans in order to create a human-alien hybrid that can survive above ground. So a lot of abductions, a lot of things are taken in order to do genetic experimentation to produce the ideal human-alien hybrid, which is what's happening right now. In the meantime, they regard us as insects. They do not regard us as anything else. Like we're walking in the woods and we see all the insects walking around, we just dismiss them. We don't want to harm the insects, but we don't care for them either. The aliens that currently, the main group who currently here, the intellectual one, are robot-like. They have no emotions. They don't have the feelings you have. They're just survivalists. They don't care about human beings at all. So the governments of the day who are working with these aliens are also being misled by them. It works both ways.
Wouldn't it be nice if we had an association with aliens who were
There are friendly ones to come.
but who were enlightened, not just friendly? Who were
There are ones who are a little bit more advanced,
who were
yes,
spiritual
but they've not
beings,
yet come.
rather than technological beings, who
Yeah.
were spiritual beings.
They will, don't worry, wait, but you might have to wait a couple of 100 years. Yeah, you won't be around. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to say that we've got lunch.
Right, okay. All right, so if anybody has no more questions, let's go for lunch now. You're all hungry.
So dehi paje har ki sev pajo gobind pul mat ja मानस जन्म का एही लाभ